Chapter 208. Within Yen Zhaoge's mind, many thoughts surfaced, rising and falling one after another. He narrowed his eyes slightly and calmed his heart. His gaze was calm and tranquil, only revealing the yearning and longing for the supreme technique of the sect as a junior disciple. Yen Zhaoge looked at Xian Dongping, who nodded mildly. Therefore, Yen Zhaoge walked towards that illusory silhouette of radiance, entering it entirely. Streams of light instantly descended from that silhouetted scroll, enveloping Yen Zhaoge. A great amount of characters surfaced within Yen Zhaoge's mind, the contents of the second half of the Clear Qi Profound Art. While there were some hints of the Clear Qi lineage of pre-Great Calamity times, ever since the heaven-establishing old man Qiu Yuan and having been analyzed and perfected by successive generations of Broad Creed Mountains experts, the Clear Qi Profound Art had already possessed its own unique profundities, being an outstanding martial scripture. Yen Zhaoge compared it with the Divine Palace's scripture vault that he had browsed before, gaining much from it. Still, these could all be slowly thought about later. What Yen Zhaoge paid most attention to at this moment was that as he came into contact with the Clear Qi Profound Art's secret martial art, his consciousness seemed to have traversed through space as scenes from many years ago appeared before his eyes. Boundless calamities and tribulations arose uncontrollably, and the heavens and earth were turned upside down. It was as if doomsday had arrived. A streak of light descended from the heavens, breaking through the layers of the heavens and tearing through the infinite space as it descended upon the eight extremities world, landing amidst a mountain range. On one of the mountain peaks, there was a mysterious and long mark. After an unknown number of years, one day, someone passed by this place and looked at the traces left behind. His heart was moved, and he realized the profoundness within. He then sat in front of the mountain peak for many days, trying to comprehend the concept, looking at that person's features. Yen Zhaoge recognized him as the founder of their clan, the heaven-establishing old man Qiu Yuan. This was the scene of the divine light descending to the ground, leaving behind a relic. Qiu Yuan faced the wall to gain enlightenment of the Tao, gradually forming the process of creating the grand, clear energy art. The divine light might have been caused by the power of one of the Divine Palace warriors. Perhaps after the Divine Palace was destroyed, the wreckage fell down. As Yen Zhaoge neared the silhouette of that square imprint, once more, the world before his eyes instantly darkened, as though the very heavens and earth were collapsing. Through analyzing the faint marks left on the seal platform, he was able to see through them. Yen Zhaoge suddenly felt a chill in his heart. As the images within his mind changed, he seemed to vaguely see a fragment of something traversing through layers of space. He descended from the sky, falling into the eight extremities world. Having obtained this, Qiu Yuan used it as a foundation to create the heavenly broad creed palm. While the image was simple, Yen Zhaoge could feel his heart throbbing as he knew that the fragment of that thing was very important. Gazing over carefully, Yen Zhaoge saw that as the fragment fell, a figure could vaguely be seen rising upwards from the hole in the void. The fragments did not seem to have fallen by accident. Instead, it was intentionally thrown down by this person. It was just a pity that this simple remnant of will stopped when Qiu Yuan created the heavenly broad creed palm. Yen Zhaoge felt a little vexed. After calming his emotions, Yen Zhaoge pondered, I've never heard anyone mention this fragment before. Was it already lost long ago? Or was it because it was too important that only the clan's highest echelon members knew about it, perhaps even the chief passing it down to only one person? Yen Zhaoge let out a long breath, calming his mind. The confusion has not been resolved. There are more and more questions, but there are also more clues and directions. Temporarily burying these questions that could not be resolved within his heart, Yen Zhaoge began carefully comprehending the profundities of the heavenly broad creed palm. due to certain reasons, Yan Zhaoge had comprehended this supreme martial art. Compared to the clear chi profound art from before, he was even more proficient in it. When everything had ended, Yan Zhaoge slowly opened his eyes, bowing to Xian Dongping. "I've troubled senior apprentice granduncle." Xian Dongping glanced deeply at Yan Zhaoge, shaking his head. "No matter, go and cultivate diligently." Yan Zhaoge left the martial repository. Who was already waiting outside with Pan Pan. Seeing Yan Zhaoge emerge, he gave a simple and honest laugh. "Young master, it's settled. It's just swallowing it in one gulp. Go back and slowly analyze and cultivate." Yan Zhaoge waved his hands. "Now let's go back first." Pan Pan lunged over once more. This time, Yan Zhaoge did not stop him, hugging this big furry ball. The current Pan Pan's size was roughly similar to that of the giant panda in Yan Zhaoge's memories. While he was still slightly larger, at the very least, he no longer had that aura of a charging elephant like before. Returning to his lodgings, Yan Zhaoge cultivated in peace. One day, as he walked out towards the morning sun, Yan Zhaoge's heart suddenly jolted. Silently calculating the days, he walked out. Following beside him, Ahu asked curiously, "Young master, where are we going?" Yan Zhaoge sighed. "To look for eldest apprentice uncle. Today is the anniversary of senior apprentice brother Shi's death. I will also go and offer incense." Ahu blinked, realizing what was going on. Not speaking, he obediently followed behind Yan Zhaoge. Proceeding along the mountain, Yan Zhaoge ascended a small hill. Indeed, he saw two people standing there. One was a tall, mighty man. It was precisely his eldest apprentice uncle, Shi Tai. Behind him stood Xue Fei. Xue Fei's expression was solemn. Seeing Yan Zhaoge and Ahu arrive, he nodded lightly, completely unlike his usual relaxed, unrestrained smile. Shi Tai swiveled his head. "Zhaoge came? How thoughtful of you." Yan Zhaoge greeted Shi Tai. "Eldest apprentice uncle, my condolences." Shi Tai's expression was calm. "As usual, I'm fine." Turning his head and advancing once more, his gaze fell on a tomb. While it was simple, its surroundings were exceptionally clean, with no weeds to be seen at all. Before the tomb stood a tombstone, on which the words "Tomb of Beloved Son Shi Songtao" were written. On the two sides of this tomb, there were also two other tombstones. Yan Zhaoge and Ahu were both silent. Those two tombstones also had tablets erected before them, stating the identities of their owners, respectively belonging to Shi Tai's daughter-in-law and grandson. These three tombstones were actually all tombstones of his personal belongings. However, this made one feel even more stifled, because Shi Songtao's family of three had perished, not even their corpses and bones having been found. Yan Zhaoge and the other stood silently behind Shi Tai. For a white-haired person to send off a black-haired person had always been a great tragedy. Looking at Shi Songtao's name, the figure of a handsome youth surfaced in Yan Zhaoge's mind, his features 90% similar to Shi Tai's, the father and son virtually having been cast from the same mold. Yan Zhaoge himself had never personally interacted with this senior apprentice brother Shi before. His understanding of him all stemmed from the memories of his body's original owner. Shi Songtao was even older than Xue Fei. When his name had spread far and wide in the Eight Extremities world, hailed as the heaven's favored son of broad Creed Mountain's new generation, Yan Zhaoge had still been a child, just starting to cultivate in the martial arts. As compared to the upright, serious Shi Tai, Shi Songtao was more gentle, but both father and son were similarly warm-hearted. In their youth, Xue Fei and Yan Zhaoge had received much guidance and care from this senior apprentice brother of theirs. At that time, Shi Songtao had also been a high-spirited young heaven's favored son, having even tied the knot with his lover, having given birth to a son early on, being blissful to the extreme. Even Sure Tai enjoyed the happiness of his family during those few years, and the smile on his face had increased by a lot. Sadly, all of this was now a thing of the past. Sure Tai stood there, his entire person resembling a statue, as if he had already been standing there for 1,000 years. To be continued. P.S. Thanks to reader Blue Dream Wind Chimes Floating Red Tip. Thanks also to other friends who have tipped this book, subscribed to this book, and voted for this book. Thank you all. Chapter 209. Sure Songtao had treated others warmly in the past, his relations with them being rather good. Every year, on the anniversary of his death, many old friends would come to pay their respects, but everyone would tacitly avoid the mourning. Other than Sure Tai himself, there were only a few personal disciples who would come with him to Sure Songtao's tomb. Since Yen Zhaoge had the heart to come, Sure Tai naturally wouldn't refuse. After Yen Zhaoge and the others had offered incense to Sure Songtao's family, Sure Tai said, "You are considerate. Go back and rest." Yen Zhaoge and Su Fei exchanged glances before bringing Ahu along and leaving. On the way, looking back, Yen Zhaoge saw that Sure Tai's figure was still silently standing there. Beside him, Su Fei sighed. Master is still blaming himself. Yen Zhaoge sighed along with him. As one of the few in the know, he knew what Su Fei meant. That year, when Sure Songtao's family of 3 had met with danger, Sure Tai had actually had the chance to save them. However, the situation had just been critical, with broad Creed Mountain's interests also about to be severely damaged. Of those present, only Sure Tai had had the ability to stop it. In the end, faced with such a dilemma, Sure Tai had ultimately chosen to protect the clan as a whole. However, this way, he had been unable to save his descendants in time, finally having to send them off. This was the regret of Sure Tai's life. Having always felt no guilt towards the heavens and earth, he had only felt guilt towards his own kin. Even now, while a cenotaph had been erected, Sure Tai had actually still not given up on his final hope. As long as there was a chance, he would head to that place to investigate, hoping that there was a chance that Sure Songtao's family could still be alive. After all, he had never seen their corpses. Sadly, after 5 years, he had still not found anything, his final hope also being extinguished bit by bit. Su Fei murmured, if he could do it all over again, would Master make a different choice? He was talking to himself, not expecting an answer from Yen Zhaoge. Yen Zhaoge walked silently by the side. Su Fei sighed, continuing, although I feel grief, although I blame myself, although I feel guilty, perhaps I would still make the same choice. Master, Yen Zhaoge asked softly, what if it was you, senior brother Su? Between you and your family, how would you choose? After a long silence, Shui Fei replied, I don't know. Perhaps I will only be able to give an answer when I truly face it. Yen Zhaoge nodded, the two no longer speaking as they advanced side by side. Arriving at a fork in the road, they cupped their fists towards each other, bidding each other farewell. They returned to their respective residences. Returning to his lodgings, Yen Zhaoge sat in the meditative position, closing his eyes as he calmed his heart and settled his thoughts. After a short while, Yen Zhaoge reopened his eyes and took out a golden talisman from his bosom. This golden talisman had been obtained by Yen Zhaoge after he had slain the fallen Xie Zi in the devilish domain at Clear Concealed Lake. He looked at the mysterious and complicated patterns on the surface of the golden talisman. Yen Zhaoge pondered seriously. It seems to be a rather strange and rare type of text, something that only appeared after the Great Calamity. Yen Zhaoge laughed bitterly. It was the same as the relic of the glacial dragon martial saint back then. This sort of thing that had appeared after the Great Calamity, yet was comparatively ancient compared to the present, made him feel the most helpless. It just so happened to be the weakest link in his knowledge. However, Yen Zhaoge was also working hard to make up for his shortcomings in this area. Currently, looking at the golden talisman, it was not that he had no way of dealing with it at all. It seems a little like the text of the extreme northern regions, only circulating amongst a small number of people there. After pondering for a moment, Yen Zhaoge instructed his retainer, "Go fetch all the ancient texts circulating in the north of the gold region, and give them to me. Take as many as you have, the older the better." Of the Thunder Domain's 6 regions, the northernmost region that was directly connected to the extreme northern ice sea was the Gold region. Very quickly, a black-clothed martial practitioner delivered over what Yen Zhaoge wanted. After spending some time analyzing it, Yen Zhaoge gradually had an idea of what it was. He lightly tapped on that golden talisman, his fingertips tracing the patterns of the golden talisman, leaving behind numerous marks. Those marks remained on the surface of the golden talisman, not dissipating for a long time. Yen Zhaoge retracted his finger, scrutinizing the patterns on the golden talisman that were nearing completion before finally striking it with his palm. The golden talisman suddenly erupted with a dazzling light, actually transforming into specks of light before vanishing without a trace. Seeing this, a satisfied smile instead appeared on Yen Zhaoge's face. Then, those specks of golden light floated about, condensing and not dissipating as they transformed into clumps of light mist hovering in midair. Yen Zhaoge sucked in a deep breath, resembling a whale sucking in water, as those clumps of light mist were instantly sucked in by him. For just that one moment, a feeling of smoke and fire burning arose within Yen Zhaoge's heart and lungs. With Yen Zhaoge's current cultivation base, the various internal organs within his body had already been tempered countless times by his aura qi. The feeling of discomfort only lasted for an instant before vanishing very quickly. Looking within his body, Yen Zhaoge saw specks of golden light drifting about unceasingly, evenly adhering to the surface of every single one of his blood vessels, as though adding a layer of golden radiance to the blood vessels within his body. Even the tiniest, most delicate blood vessels were no exception. Yen Zhaoge calmly inhaled and exhaled, circulating his qi and blood, his blood resembling boiling lava as it emitted a heavy roar. After circulating his aura qi 36 times, Yen Zhaoge retracted his cultivation, a faint golden light flickering on his skin. Standing up from the ground, Yen Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. Some things seem like they can also be brought forward. Thinking thus, Yen Zhaoge waved his hand, a few streaks of light flickering past, hovering within the air. They were all low-grade spirit artifacts: lofty mountain armor, incinerating light sword, mistlock sword, radiant sunwheel, purple gold thunder sword, flying thunderblade. Other than the mid-grade spirit artifact, the hidden clear sunlight saber, and the jade dragon sword that Yen Zhaoge had always carried along with him. All of Yen Zhaoge's current low-grade spirit artifacts were basically all here. Speaking of which, all of them were the signature weapons of the other Holy Land's core heirs. The original owners of these spirit weapons were Lu Shengfeng, Zhao Hao, Xia Zi, Xiao Shen, Yen Shan, and Lin Zhou. Just this list and the spirit weapons were enough to make other martial practitioners of the same generation sigh in amazement. If Yen Zhaoge were to hold an exhibition of his spoils of war, there would probably be many people who would be angered to the point of vomiting blood. With Yen Zhaoge's current cultivation base, he could basically only wield a single low-grade spirit artifact at any one time. The remaining ones would either be swapped out or used as hidden weapons, relying on the explosive power of the moment their connection was broken to injure the enemy or to restrict his opponent's spirit artifact. If one had too many spirit weapons, they could directly smash their opponents to death. This was not a joke. After Yen Zhaoge had stepped into the martial grandmaster realm, these spirit artifacts would be of use at the same time. However, Yen Zhaoge had other ideas. With his rate of improvement, the martial Grandmaster realm was not far away. After pondering for a moment, Yen Zhaoge lightly tapped out with his finger, keeping the lofty mountain armor, the radiant sun wheel, and the flying thunder saber, only leaving behind the incinerating light sword, the vapor sealing sword, and the purple gold thunder sword. Then, with a flip of his palm, a bamboo branch appeared within it, a dark green bamboo branch that vaguely flickered with a purple light, opening the internal crystal furnace. Yen Zhaoge threw that bamboo branch and the 3 low-grade spirit artifacts within. To be continued. Chapter 210. The internal crystal furnace rumbled, overflowing with light. The circulation within the furnace was actually very slow, enveloped by numerous clouds, unable to clearly see what was happening within. Yen Zhaoge, on the other hand, appeared exceptionally serious as he controlled the internal crystal furnace. At the same time, he was also exceptionally patient. He wanted to forge a treasure for himself, one that was completely based on his own will, fitting in with what he had learnt, a treasure that was purely created by himself. Yen Zhaoge had a plan in mind, pursuing a perfect result as much as possible. In his plans, this was not something that could be accomplished in a single stroke. Regarding this, Yen Zhaoge was not flustered or flustered. In the process of forging, he also unceasingly adjusted and perfected his original thoughts according to the actual situation. In the following days, Yen Zhaoge's life was extremely fulfilling, whether it was cultivating in the martial Tao to raise his strength, studying the principles of formations, or activating the internal crystal furnace to forge treasures. Time flew, and a few months had already passed. During this period of time, Yen Zhaoge had always remained in seclusion, only emerging from seclusion when the black nightmare storms of the Wind Domain's great western desert were about to weaken. Ahu, help me contact our clan's people over at the Wind Domain and prepare some things in advance. Yen Zhaoge stretched lazily. Ahu nodded in agreement, then left to handle the matter. Yen Zhaoge narrowed his eyes, raising his head to look at the forest, the mottled sunlight falling through the gaps between the branches and leaves. The 4th extreme Yin bout should already have ended. I wonder what the final result was. Yen Zhaoge muttered to himself, pondering. As he strode forward, in the 4th extreme Yin bout, Broad Creed Mountain still sat on the sidelines, not participating, while Feng Yunxing's extreme Yin physique had already recovered. She was still in secluded cultivation. Whether it was Yen Zhaoge or Fu Enshu and the other higher echelon experts of Broad Creed Mountain, while all of them were anxious, they all tacitly did not let Feng Yunxing participate in the 4th extreme Yin bout. The reason was none other than that Feng Yunxing still needed time to make up for that gap of 2 years. His opponent was also improving. Furthermore, he also used his full strength to fly forward, instead of standing still and waiting for Feng Yunxing to catch up. As Yen Zhaoge pondered, he arrived at the small valley where Feng Yunxing was. Sure enough, he could see that Feng Yunxing was cultivating diligently as usual. The hand holding the saber remained stable, but there seemed to be a flame rising in the depths of his eyes. It was becoming more and more intense. It was often difficult for an outsider to understand what kind of energy would erupt from a person who had gained something and then lost it. After falling to the bottom of the valley, when there was a chance to regain something that was lost, and then lost again in front of him, what kind of energy would erupt? Feng Yunxing's mentality and willpower were both top-notch. All the pressure was turned into motivation, allowing her to burn herself endlessly. Even if she was temporarily not sent by Broad Creed Mountain to participate in the extreme Yin bout, she would also be able to understand. He just had to work harder to improve himself. Yen Zhaoge stood quietly where he was, watching Feng Yunxing train. On the other side, there was another person who was training methodically. It was a child who was not even 12 years old. However, he had already refined his chi into heavenly energy and stepped into the Grandmaster realm. Ing Longtu had successfully broken the record of Yan Zhaoga's father, Yan Di, becoming the youngest martial scholar in the Eight Extremities world's recorded history following the Great Calamity. The current Ing Longtu, he was fully focused, his gaze flickering with a spirituality that was usually not present as he trained meticulously, his level of concentration not inferior to Feng Yunsheng by the side in the slightest. It was only at this time that he did not seem as slow as he usually was. Accompanied by his punches, the chi and blood of his majestic fleshly body surged, far surpassing most martial practitioners of the same cultivation level. Yan Zhaoga smiled as he watched the two of them train. In the distance, the giant panda Pan was currently sitting on the ground, bored to death as he stuffed food into his mouth. Now, seeing Yan Zhaoga appear, his eyes instantly lit up as he ran over. Following junior apprentice Sister Feng, "You really have good food." Yan Zhaoga smiled as he hugged Pan, stroking his big head. Feng Yunsheng's little black dog, Little Meaty, had long since become familiar with Yan Zhaoga. While it didn't rush over like Pan now, it also wagged its little tail happily. Ing Longtu, having completed a round of training, stopped. Seeing Yan Zhaoga, his eyes also lit up as he walked over, smiling a little bashfully. Senior apprentice brother Yan Zhaoga smiled. "Were there any problems in your cultivation?" Ing Longtu scratched his head, trying hard to summarize his words. "Earlier, I heard a senior apprentice brother mention that it is hard to balance speed and strength at the same time, even using Infinite Boundless Mountain and the Heavenly Thunder Hall as a comparison. However, I feel like there seems to be something wrong with what he said." Yan Zhaoga smiled. Han Long was straightforward enough. It was just that he didn't know if he had raised this question with that senior apprentice brother of his. "What he said is also right and also not right," Yan Zhaoga explained. "Just saying that it is hard to balance speed and strength at the same time is not accurate. Similarly, when you punch out with your fist, if your fist is fast, the power contained within it will also not be weak. It is often said that the attacks of the Heavenly Thunder Hall are as fast as lightning, as fierce as the rumbling of thunder. The first half is that they are fast, while the second half is also praising their ferocious strength." Yan Zhaoga raised his palm, extending it forward. "However, when we make a move, it involves the problem of exerting force. Only after accumulating and exerting force together can it be a true attack. However, in this process of accumulating and exerting force, it involves the choice between speed and strength. Under most circumstances, the more sufficient the accumulation of force, the more ferocious the force exerted, but the longer the time required to do so." Yan Zhaoga looked at Ing Longtu. "It is often said that the Heavenly Thunder Hall and Infinite Boundless Mountain both walk extreme paths, one fast, one slow. Actually, this is where their divergence lies." Ing Longtu nodded rather dazedly. "It refers to the choice of speed and strength in the entire process of exerting force, and not just the speed at which they have already exerted force." Yan Zhaoga smiled. "That's right. Rather than saying that there is a difference in the speed at which the Heavenly Thunder Hall and Infinite Boundless Mountain have it, it would be better to say that there is a difference in the speed at which they change their moves. In terms of strength and style, the two both walk the path of ferocity. The Heavenly Thunder Hall is more violent, while Infinite Boundless Mountain is more vigorous." As the two spoke, Ahu arrived within the valley, walking towards Yan Zhaoga, a smile blossoming on his face. "Young master, I have already contacted the wind domain according to your instructions." After first completing the normal report, Ahu said smilingly, "Also, the results of the fourth extreme Yin bout are out. The Sacred Sun clan's Mengwan failed." Yen Zhaoge raised his brows slightly. Tell me what exactly happened. Ah Hu smiled happily. Something seemed to have happened to Meng Wan herself, resulting in her defeat in the final round of the bout. Yen Zhaoge knit his brows slightly. Did the clan's spectating seniors bring back the images of the battle? Ahu nodded. Yes, seeing the actual scene of the battle. Not only did Yen Zhaoge not feel happy, his expression instead turning solemn. What I feared has come. The worst situation has appeared. Chapter 211. Looking at the engraved traces of light, Yen Zhaoge's expression turned a little gloomy for once. In the fourth extreme Yin bout, Yen Zhaoge and the higher echelons of Broad Creed Mountain had not allowed Feng Yunsheng to participate. The previous 2 years had caused Feng Yunsheng to lag behind the other maidens of extreme Yin. She needed time to catch up, especially when he had to make up for the gap between him and the Sacred Sun clan's Meng Wan. While Yen Zhaoge's various methods had allowed her to advance by leaps and bounds, the Sacred Sun clan's Meng Wan was not someone to be trifled with in the first place, also having held the Extreme Yin crown for at least 2 years. The crown of Extreme Yin had an immense effect on the cultivation of maidens of Extreme Yin that could not be neglected. In order to take first place in the Extreme Yin bout, Feng Yunsheng still needed patience, needed effort, and even more needed time. Participating in the Extreme Yin bout was for the sake of winning the Extreme Yin crown, and not for the sake of accompanying others. If it was number 1, it meant that it was a holy weapon. If it wasn't number 1, it meant nothing. While it was very cruel, this was the truth of the Extreme Yin bout. The result of the discussion between Yen Zhaoge, Fu Enshu, and the others was to wait until the next Extreme Yin bout before letting Feng Yunsheng participate. Before this, he could only calm his heart and endure. Actually, according to Yen Zhaoge's predictions, in the next Extreme Yin bout, which would also be the 5th Extreme Yin bout, Feng Yunsheng's chances were still not high. It was more for her to accumulate further experience in clashing with the other maidens of Extreme Yin. Fortunately, they did not have to wait for too long. Broad Creed Mountain could still afford to wait. It was just that the pressure was still not small, with the current situation rapidly changing. What Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain were especially concerned about: the Sacred Sun clan's east-coming martial saint, Huang Guanglie, could emerge from seclusion at any time. If Huang Guanglie emerged from seclusion and successfully advanced a step further, the pressure on Broad Creed Mountain would be, that was huge. Moreover, the ending of the incident at Clear Concealed Lake did not mean that the decimating abyss and the 9 underworlds would cease to exist just like that. Therefore, time was still limited. However, according to Yen Zhaoge's estimations, barring any major unforeseen events, the 6th Extreme Yin bout would be the time for Feng Yunsheng to exert her strength. However, a great change happened. The changes did not lie with Feng Yunsheng and Broad Creed Mountain, but with others. When clashing with Lin Zhou back then, Lin Zhou had revealed that he knew about Feng Yunsheng's background, also knowing that Yen Zhaoge had used Cloud Portent Mountain's Yin Yang Cloud Spring to help Feng Yunsheng recover her extreme Yin physique. Yen Zhaoge had a general understanding of Lin Zhou's background. He had always been curious as to how Lin Zhou knew about Feng Yunsheng. According to Yen Zhaoge's calculations, if not for his interference, Feng Yunsheng would most likely not have entered Broad Creed Mountain. If she had been able to escape the pursuit of the Sacred Sun clan, she would most likely have entered Jade Sea City. She had previously been born in the Sacred Sun clan and was also a maiden of Extreme Yin. However, it was still understandable that her extreme Yin physique had been neglected by the outside world. However, how did Lin Zhou know that Yen Zhaoge had used a yin-yang coexisting technique to help Feng Yunsheng recover her extreme Yin physique? Jade Sea City had a similar technique? Or could it be that Lin Zhou figured out such a method himself? if it was the latter, Yan Zhaoge was actually not worried. What he was worried about was that someone else having researched out this method, Lin Zhou coming to know of it afterwards. It was fine if Lin Zhou knew about it. The Heavenly Thunder Hall's Maiden of Extreme Yin did not have much competition. The crux was who the original owner of this method had been in that era. Jade Sea City aside, the worrisome thing was that the one who was most likely to have researched out this method, actually, it was the Sacred Sun clan. Firstly, they had originally cultivated in the pure yang qi of the sun, having researched it deeply. Things would always move in the opposite direction when pushed to the extreme. This was a common principle. Secondly, they were the sacred ground that had been in contact with the extreme Yin crown for the longest time. Even if they did not have sufficient information left behind from before the Great Calamity, the Sacred Sun clan's experts, having researched it for many years and months, would also very likely have some results. This was something that had always been on Yan Zhaoge's mind. Now, his worst predictions had come true. Carefully watching the process of Meng Wan's competition with others, Yan Zhaoge knew that something had indeed happened to her, but it was not like she had been injured during the second extreme Yin bout. Instead, it was that she had been trying out a yin-yang coexisting cultivation technique, still in its initial stages, still not mature enough, thus affecting her performance. Even though the Sacred Sun clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall were allies, it was also impossible for Lin Zhou to tell them about this technique. Moreover, while the Heavenly Thunder Hall's Maiden of Extreme Yin indeed had the same symptoms, it was still inferior to Meng Wan's. This meant that Lin Zhou actually only knew of the existence of yin-yang coexisting technique, but did not understand the specifics of it. The Heavenly Thunder Hall had also only recently obtained this train of thought, beginning to explore it from the very beginning. Over on the Sacred Sun clan's side, while it was not as good as Yan Zhaoge's, it was already on the right track. Different from the previous accident, Meng Wan's loss of the extreme Yin crown this time was an acceptable loss for the Sacred Sun clan. Temporarily lying dormant was for the sake of absolute dominance and dominance in the future. It could be predicted that having lost the extreme Yin crown once more, with Huang Guanglia still in seclusion, the Sacred Sun clan would at least have to retreat conservatively for the next year. However, when they raised their heads again the next time, they would also erupt with even more terrifying power. Moreover, the one who had won the fourth extreme Yin bout was a strictly neutral disciple of Turbid Wave Pavilion. The Sacred Sun clan would have it even easier. Speaking of this was also the first time a disciple of Turbid Wave Pavilion had participated in an extreme Yin bout this time. In the end, she had won the championship. While there was also a problem with Meng Wan herself being able to suppress the maidens of extreme Yin of Jade Sea City, Infinite Boundless Mountain, and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, it looked like she had also been preparing for many years. While Turbid Wave Pavilion was strictly neutral, like Jade Sea City, facing the threat of the Flame Devils of the East Sea head-on, being able to obtain the extreme Yin crown would be of great help to them. However, barring any major accidents, it would also only be this once. Next year, Meng Wan, having made all her preparations, would most likely return as a king once more. Yan Zhaoge gradually knit his brows. This time it's really bad, as he pondered. Feng Yinsheng kept her saber. Seeing Yan Zhaoge arrive, she smiled and greeted Senior Apprentice Brother Yan. Yan Zhaoge's brows instantly relaxed as he praised, "Good saber art." Feng Yinsheng glanced at Yan Zhaoge. "Senior Apprentice Brother Yan, have the results of the fourth extreme Yin bout already come out? Or was it little Wan who won the championship?" Yan Zhaoge shook his head. "No." Feng Yunsheng was a little taken aback. Yan Zhaoge sighed. However, the results were even worse than Meng Wan's. After explaining the matter clearly, Feng Yunsheng's expression turned heavy, but her emotions were calm. She grasped the hilt of her saber. I will work harder, definitely, while her heart was firm. Feng Yunsheng also didn't feel optimistic, only doing her best. Having always been strong and independent, not willing to rely on others, for the first time, a look of anticipation appeared on her face as she looked at Yan Zhaoge. Senior apprentice brother, Yan, do you have any other methods? Yan Zhaoge lowered his eyelids. No. Feng Yunsheng looked calmly at Yan Zhaoge, not speaking, the two facing each other silently. After a long time, Feng Yunsheng said softly, Senior apprentice brother Yan, I admit that I have unwillingness within my heart, extravagant hopes, fantasies. However, having come this far, winning the extreme Yin bout has long since not been for myself alone. For the clan that took me in, for my master to teach me, for you, senior apprentice brother, Yen, who stood up for me back then, I must win. Feng Yunsheng looked straight at Yan Zhaoge. No matter what method it is, I am willing to try it. No matter how difficult and arduous it is, I am willing to bear it. No, I must definitely be able to bear it. Chapter 212. Looking at Feng Yunsheng. Yan Zhaoge could not see within the girl's gaze any impulsiveness of a moment of hot-headedness, but instead a calm yet resolute resolution. Feng Yunsheng said word by word, This is my own choice. I will take responsibility for it. There is indeed a way. Yan Zhaoge said slowly after a moment of silence. Yan Zhaoge was not a pretentious person, also not purposely making things difficult for Feng Yunsheng so that she could bring it up herself. Although he still had a solution this time, he really didn't want to use it. You shouldn't be in a rush to make a decision. Yan Zhaoge slowly shook his head. Have you heard of cold marrow needles? Feng Yunsheng was a little at a loss. Yan Zhaoge said, It's normal that you haven't heard of it. Still, you should have heard of lighting a soul lamp, right? Feng Yunsheng had indeed heard of this before. In pre-Great Calamity times, there was a legendary torture that caused one to be unable to live or die, suffering eternal torment to the point where one wished they were dead. Yan Zhaoge nodded, before looking deeply at Feng Yunsheng. Before the Great Calamity, the cold marrow needles and the soul-lighting lamp were amongst the 7 great tortures. This technique causes extreme coldness to spread from the bone marrow to the outside. However, the coldness will not numb the person. Instead, it will be as painful as being pierced by billions of needles. While being tortured, one's consciousness will always remain awake. It's impossible to faint even if one wants to. Yan Zhaoge said calmly, This is not something that one can grit their teeth and endure through purely with strong willpower. It is not just the fleshly body. Even the soul of the one being tortured will be riddled with thousands of holes. While weak, they will not die. They will forever be tortured, every moment, every part of their body, inside and out. I'm talking about every part of your body. It's not like I'm stabbing you with thousands of needles. It's not like I'm stabbing you with every pore or acupoint. It's like there's no gap, and it's all over your body. Yan Zhaoge scanned Feng Yunsheng from head to toe. Some parts of the human body are stronger in endurance, while others are exceptionally weak. For example, your eyeballs and other places. But the cold marrow needles don't care about that. It takes care of every part of your body. So the more vulnerable the place, the more painful it is. Feng Yunsheng listened to Yan Zhaoge's narration quietly. Yan Zhaoge said slowly, Afterwards, because you possess the extreme Yin physique, you are unable to do so. Therefore, the pain you feel from the cold marrow needles will be more intense than normal people. This method can indeed strengthen your extreme Yin body. It can even accelerate your daily martial cultivation through the extreme Yin body. It can further increase your cultivation speed, but the prerequisite is that you can endure the pain. Having said that, Yan Zhaoge fell silent. He had never intended to use this method from the very beginning. He would rather Feng Yunsheng improve a little slower and wait for another 1 or 2 years. After learning that the Sacred Sun clan was also searching for a yin-yang coexisting technique to help Mengwan advance, Yan Zhaoge had actually still not considered this method, instead trying to think of other methods. This method was something that even Yan Zhaoge himself did not have absolute confidence in persevering through. "I'm willing to try." Just as Yan Zhaoge finished speaking, Feng Yunsheng answered calmly. Yan Zhaoge looked at her. Feng Yunsheng smiled. "Currently, there's no other way, right? Time waits for no man. If senior brother Yan has a better method, that would naturally be for the best. But before that, let me try this cold marrow needle." With Feng Yunsheng having wasted 2 years, Meng Wan was the most outstanding maiden of Extreme Yin and was already far ahead of the rest. Now that Meng Wan was also using the yin-yang coexisting technique to strengthen herself further, if Feng Yunsheng and Broad Creed Mountain wanted to catch up, their hopes instantly dimmed. The difference in their starting points was too great, and they were both advancing. Feng Yunsheng's rate of improvement had to be much faster than Meng Wan's in order to catch up. Otherwise, even if her speed was faster. However, there was a limit to how fast she could be. By the time she caught up, who knew how long it would be? With the current situation rapidly changing, there was not that much time left for her and Broad Creed Mountain. She pursed her lips. "Senior brother, Yen, look at how confident I am now. Actually, I'm also not confident that I can really endure it. As you say, it's one of the 7 great tortures. Its original intent is to torture people, to extort confessions, to make people wish they were dead. If it's so easy to endure, how can it still be considered a great torment? However, I want to try." Feng Yunsheng sucked in a deep breath, her gaze resolute as ever. "I want to win the Extreme Yin bout. However difficult, I must also endure it, persevere." Yan Zhaoge was silent for a long time before he nodded. "All right." Feng Yunsheng smiled. "Don't tell Master and the others first." Yan Zhaoge sighed. "All right." Having come to a decision, the tense atmosphere finally relaxed somewhat. When the two had been conversing earlier, a formless aura had seemed to have enveloped the surrounding area, causing others to unconsciously not dare to approach. Now that the atmosphere had relaxed, Little Meaty instantly ran towards Feng Yunsheng happily. However, just having run halfway, a massive black shadow suddenly flashed past before her eyes, causing a gust of wind, which nearly knocked the little black dog over. Pan Pan, with a speed even greater than Little Meaty's, rushed before Feng Yunsheng, his big eyes blinking repeatedly. As a qualified glutton, his stomach had also been captured by Feng Yunsheng in recent days. Feng Yunsheng shook her head and laughed, stroking Pan Pan's head before waving towards Little Meaty. Little Meaty leapt up, leaping into Feng Yunsheng's embrace. It first rubbed itself comfortably before baring its teeth towards Pan Pan, finally turning its head away very proudly, no longer looking at Pan Pan. With dark circles around his eyes, Pan Pan looked at Little Meaty's figure before lowering his head to look at himself. He shook his big head, letting out a light cry as white fire and black water surged on his body once more, enveloping him. The next moment, the water and fire dissipated. Pan Pan, who had originally been the size of an ordinary panda, shrunk once more. His external appearance was still that of a mature panda, not having turned back into a furless cub, just that his figure had shrunk greatly, becoming about the same size as Little Meaty. Then Pan Pan let out a happy cry, his chubby body resembling a small fur ball as he leapt up from the ground, also leaping into Feng Yunsheng's embrace. Little Meaty instantly stared, looking nervously at her owner. Her eyes filled with helplessness. Feng Yunsheng shook her head and sighed, hugging them with both arms. Seeing this scene, Yen Zhaoge's gaze drifted a little. A thought very suddenly arose within his mind. If only he were a little stronger, a little more capable, a little more capable. Let this strong, bright girl before him, even if she didn't do anything at all, just happily playing with Pan Pan and Little Meaty, then also being able to wear that crown. Yen Zhaoge shook his head slightly, stabilizing his mind. Once more, his gaze no longer drifting. He could not help but laugh, completely given by others, yet not putting in any effort herself. That way, I'm afraid that she herself would instead feel a little disappointed. Looking at Feng Yunsheng, Yen Zhaoge shook his head lightly. While there is a saying that the heavens reward the diligent, those who work hard might not necessarily be rewarded. I've really seen this sort of thing too many times. But you will wear the extreme Yin crown. P.S. Thank you to the book friend Martial Alliance Mortal Dust Falling for your 10,000 points reward. Thanks also to the other friends who subscribed to this book, voted for this book, rewarded this book, and recommended this book. Thank you all. Chapter 2:13. The cold marrow needle wasn't actually used to stab someone. Instead, it was used with a special technique in medicine to adjust the opponent's qi and blood, causing it to change. It would create extreme coldness from the inside out, and at the same time, it would be felt everywhere, affecting every inch of the body as if it was being stabbed by needles. Feng Yunsheng was a straightforward and decisive person. Since she had decided to try and endure it, she would not just say it but not do it. At this moment, her entire body was emitting wisps of white gas. It was incomparably cold, as if her entire body was enveloped in a layer of frost. Everything that came into contact with her body was also frozen. But in reality, the cold marrow needle technique would lock most of the cold energy within the body in order to achieve its desired effect. Only a little of it would leak out. This was the result of Feng Yunsheng's qi and blood being in disorder, so it was very difficult for her to circulate her qi to resist. Under such circumstances, one could imagine how much pain he was left in. Moreover, her senses would always remain clear and sensitive, even amplifying the pain brought by the cold marrow needles by several times. Feng Yunsheng was originally sitting cross-legged, but now she was completely unable to maintain her posture. She could only lie on her side on the ground, subconsciously curling her body into a ball. Gritting her teeth and not making a sound was the last thing she could do. Yen Zhaoge stood in front of her, expressionlessly watching this scene. Who also stood at the side, his expression solemn as he looked at Feng Yunsheng. After a while, he exhaled and said, "Young master, Miss Feng is really amazing." Yen Zhaoge did not speak as he silently calculated the time within his heart. Ying Long Tu, Pan Pan, and Little Meaty stood by the side, their gazes all revealing looks of terror. Even though Feng Yunsheng had already informed them beforehand, they still felt the urge to charge forward. There's enough time for today. Going too far is as bad as falling short. Finally, with a light yell, Yen Zhaoge struck out with his palm towards Feng Yunsheng's back at lightning speed. Feng Yunsheng's body trembled, and the cold air surging on her body finally began to gradually disappear, and the frost melted. She didn't even make a sound before fainting. For those who were being tortured by the cold marrow needles, losing consciousness was actually a great blessing. Yen Zhaoge did not let go of Feng Yunsheng's back as he unceasingly helped her recuperate the qi and blood within her body. If a person was really subjected to the cold marrow needles, then the punishment would be suspended. He didn't know how to recuperate. Yen Zhaoge's current method was to ensure that Feng Yunsheng would not suffer for nothing and pay a huge price. What he wanted was an increase in strength, a return. At the same time, he was not blindly warming Feng Yunsheng up. Blindly driving away the cold would cause the effect that he had worked hard for to be reduced and wasted. After a long time, Feng Yunsheng slowly woke up. Although the pain had not completely subsided, she could already endure it. Feng Yunsheng didn't say anything more as she sat upright once more, breathing deeply as she followed Yan Zhaoge's instructions to regulate her qi and blood. Although it was so painful that I was hovering between life and death, the effect was really immediate. After she finished cultivating, Feng Yunsheng revealed a slightly weak smile. Yan Zhaoge said, using the extreme Yin scripture as the foundation, using the method of coexistence of yin and yang as the strategy, and then using the cold marrow needle technique to speed up the process, along with other supplementary techniques, both your power of yin and your personal martial cultivation will improve by leaps and bounds. Looking deeply at Feng Yunsheng, Yan Zhaoge said, use this method for as long as you can endure, even if the time is limited. The effect will be very obvious. Feng Yunsheng smiled. Although it really is rather difficult, I will continue persevering, doing my best. Yan Zhaoge spoke no more. He nodded silently. Currently, you are rather weak. If you continue cultivating, it will instead harm your body. Rest well and recuperate. Calm your mind. Don't be impatient. Feng Yunsheng hugged the little meat that was leaping over towards her, answering, rest easy, senior apprentice brother, Yen. I understand. Pan Pan also came over, and Feng Yunsheng smiled as she stroked his head. Standing by the side, Ing Longtu asked a little uncertainly, senior apprentice sister, are you all right? Feng Yunsheng smiled. Rest easy, Han Long? I'm fine. Yan Zhaoge said, after recuperating, you can just cultivate as usual. The cold marrow needle technique cannot be too closely spaced. At the same time, after using it once, its effect will not be temporary. Cultivating on your own afterwards will also allow you to digest the results of this time. I understand. Feng Yunsheng nodded earnestly, looking at Yan Zhaoge. Thank you, senior apprentice brother, Yan. Yan Zhaoge sighed lightly. The main thing is you. After taking his leave of Feng Yunsheng, Yan Zhaoge returned to his lodgings. As he walked, he shook his head slightly. It really is a coincidence this time. The Sacred Sun clan even managed to take advantage of the timing of the day. The chaos of the decimating abyss and the 9 underworlds had caused the tense atmosphere between the sacred grounds to ease somewhat. For a considerable period of time, everyone had been wary of the decimating abyss and the 9 underworlds, also working hard to eliminate spies that might exist within their ranks. Other than the flame devils, with the addition of the decimating abyss as a common enemy, the conflict between the sacred grounds had temporarily eased. Now that the Sacred Sun clan had lost the Extreme Yin crown, as long as they didn't act too ostentatiously, it actually wouldn't be too much of a problem. If not for the decimating abyss and the 9 underworlds, Broad Creed Mountain, Infinite Boundless Mountain, and Jade Sea City would have completely been able to join forces and suppress the world illuminating peak. At the very least, they would have been able to force the Sacred Sun clans Huang Guanglia to be unable to complete his cultivation, leaving seclusion early. However, with the current environment, this plan would be very hard to carry out. Not speaking of anything else, because of the decimating abyss joining forces with the Flame Devil world earlier, the Flame Devils had been causing trouble on the East Sea for the past few months, still not having completely calmed down, even now. Yan Zhaoge's gaze turned rather deep and distant. Forging iron still requires one's own strength. I hope that Father's heaven returning divine pill can bear fruit as soon as possible. As he thought about this, Yan Zhaoge returned to his lodgings, continuing his cultivation once more. An ice blue jade coin appeared within his hands, having been obtained by sure tie from the legacy site of the glacial dragon martial saint that year, which he had brought back for Yan Zhaoge. The essence qi contained within the jade coin had already been virtually completely absorbed by Yan Zhaoge at this moment. Holding the jade coin, Yen Zhaoge circulated his aura qi, absorbing the final remnants of its essence qi into his body. The luster on the surface of the jade coin completely dimmed, while the ice-cold aura qi within Yen Zhaoge's body grew stronger and stronger, numerous ice dragons coiling within his acupoints, roaring unceasingly. The earlier glacial dragon bone soul, as well as the essence qi within this jade coin, had already been absorbed by Yen Zhaoge at this moment. In terms of quality, it was inferior to the extremely hot fire qi that Yen Zhaoge had obtained from refining the seed of leaf flame true fire with the sacred heavenly fire scripture. However, in terms of quantity, it was much more abundant. 2 powerful aura qis, one hot, one cold, surged unceasingly within Yen Zhaoge's body, emitting the roars of dragons. Within Yen Zhaoge's Dantian's qi ocean, the clear qi dispersed, the chaotic qi mass appearing, unceasingly inhaling and exhaling the power of ice and fire, causing the spirituality of his aura qi to grow more and more abundant, more and more natural. After having returned to the mountain for a little over half a year, Yen Zhaoge had lived in seclusion, cultivating unceasingly, causing his cultivation base to also soar by leaps and bounds, shooting towards a higher cultivation level. To be continued. Chapter 214. Seeking monthly votes. Thank you, everyone. Yen Zhaoge's aura qi that resembled a dragon's surged as ice and fire intermingled, yin and yang intermingling. The vigorous aura qi gradually changed, no longer radiating blazing heat or cold, as it slowly resembled the chaotic qi mass within Yen Zhaoge's dantian, becoming blurry and indistinct. It was as if it could contain all things, create all things, and annihilate all things. Yen Zhaoge looked within himself, a hint of a smile gradually appearing at the corners of his mouth. Accompanied by his thoughts, the chaotic aura qi within Yen Zhaoge's body abruptly shuddered, slowly condensing into a single point. His aura qi casually shifted within Yen Zhaoge's body, moving unceasingly as he wished, completely in tune with his thoughts. At this moment, the aura qi within Yen Zhaoge's body resembled an extension of his fleshly body, as it could be gathered and dispersed at his will. When he was still, he was like the ocean, but when he moved, he was like thunder. To be able to cultivate stellar energy to such a level, it was a sign that a middle-stage Xiantian master had stepped into the late-stage Xiantian master realm. With just a thought on Yen Zhaoge's part, that aura qi that resembled chaos instantly changed in form, rapidly turning into an existence that resembled blazing fire, setting the plains ablaze, and incinerating the heavens. In the next moment, the stellar energy had already turned into ice, forming a world of ice and snow. The frigid ice qi was divided into 2, one of which remained unchanged, while the other transformed back into the form of raging flames. Then, the 2 streams of aura qi transformed together, transforming into a vast clear qi, vast as the heavens, vast and boundless. It was precisely the qi of broad Creed Mountain's direct lineage, clear qi profound art. The streams of clear qi were majestic and vigorous, but soon, one of the streams of clear qi suddenly turned turbid and sank. As the turbid qi circulated within Yen Zhaoge's meridians, it did not feel sluggish at all, instead resembling the heavy earth as it stood in opposition to the clear qi up above. Yen Zhaoge nodded slowly. My original thinking was correct. As Zhang Xian pondered, the 2 streams of stellar energy merged back into one. Then it turned into primal chaos. Yen Zhaoge stood up, letting out a long breath as the acupoints of his entire body shuddered simultaneously, as though there were innumerable powerful existences within them. They roared and shouted together. The black nightmare storm has weakened. It's time to head to the Great West Desert. As Yen Zhaoge pondered, he left his lodgings where he saw Ahu standing with his hands behind his back, facing the sun. From an ordinary person's perspective, who seemed to be basking in the sun out of boredom. However, with Yen Zhaoge's eyesight, he could see that Ahu's head was moving slightly upwards at a virtually imperceptible speed, changing its angle very slightly. He kept the space between his eyebrows facing the sun, as if there was an invisible line connecting the sun in the sky and the space between his eyebrows, straight into the brain. The sun was high up in the sky, moving across the horizon. Its position was constantly changing, but when it was specific to a certain moment, it looked like it was not moving at all, and the range of changes was extremely small. However, Ahu could keenly and accurately grasp the changes in the gap and adjust the angle of his head. Seeing Yen Zhaoge emerge, Ahu lowered his head, smiling in a simple and honest manner. "Young master, you've only been in seclusion for a few days this time." Yen Zhaoge smiled. "There are already results. It would be a waste of time if we continue to waste it." Ahu's eyes lit up. "Young master, have you advanced to the Xiantian late-stage Grandmaster realm?" Yen Zhaoge smiled as he nodded, Ahu clicking his tongue in praise. "Really fast, compared to you, young master. The rest of us have all become stupid oxen and wooden horses. Young master, while you might not be able to break Family Head's record as the youngest martial grandmaster in time, in the martial scholar realm, your speed of improvement is very likely to be faster than Family Head's." Yen Zhaoge smiled slightly. "While I am also very satisfied with my own speed of improvement, everything still has to wait until I truly reach the martial grandmaster realm." He looked at who, instead, "It's you. Do you have confidence in breaking through into the martial grandmaster realm?" Who scratched his head. "It feels like it's still lacking that little bit." Yen Zhaoge said, "It's fine. After all, it has only been a year since you stepped into the heavenly connection stage. However, with your talent and potential, you should already be at that final step, breaking through your current bottleneck and entering a brand new heaven and earth." Ahu chuckled. "I think so too. I'll be able to catch up to Brother Fei and the others very quickly." The young geniuses of the various sacred grounds who had participated in the Heavenly Connection Meet had all gained quite a bit from it. With the calamity of the 9 underworlds having occurred afterwards, it had been even more of a rare tempering experience. After the Heavenly Connection Meet at Clear, Concealed Lake, in the half-year that Yen Zhaoge had been in secluded cultivation, the others had also been diligently cultivating. Xue Fei, Tang Yonghao, and Song Chao had long since been in the Heavenly Connection stage. Now, they had successively broken through their bottlenecks, stepping into the martial grandmaster realm. From peak martial scholars of the Heavenly Connection stage to early martial grandmasters, there were naturally still many martial grandmaster experts before them. At this level, even those as strong as Xue Fei and the others had become juniors. However, having crossed the heavenly chasm from martial scholar to martial grandmaster, the gazes with which the world looked at them would also gradually change, no longer the gazes with which they had looked at disciples of the younger generation in the past. Moreover, in comparison to their age and the talent and strength they had displayed at the same cultivation level, it could be foreseen that Xue Fei and the others still had great futures ahead of them. Just becoming a martial grandmaster was merely a new beginning for them, their future bright. Just like how there was a heavenly chasm from martial artist to martial scholar, countless people had been stuck at this point for a long time. From martial scholar to martial grandmaster, there was similarly a heavenly chasm. Many martial scholars stopped at the late Xiantian stage or the heavenly connection stage, unable to advance any further, passing the latter half of their lives muddle-headed like this. As elites of the direct disciples of the various sacred grounds, Xue Fei and the others naturally wouldn't have reached such a level. However, being able to become a martial grandmaster at just over 30 years of age was still a rare thing. As long as no major accidents occurred, their futures were destined to be limitless. Yen Zhaoge patted Ahu's shoulder. "Let's go." we will head over to the Wind Domain. The various disasters of the Great Western Desert are currently at their weakest. After reporting to his father Yan Di and his Grand Master Yuan Zhengfeng, Yan Zhaoge brought Ahu and his entourage along with him and left the mountain, other than Ahu and the others because of the cold marrow needles. Feng Yinsheng also traveled together. After all, even Yan Zhaoge himself wasn't sure how long he would be away in the Great Western Desert this time. While the clan seniors were rather worried that Feng Yunsheng might meet with any mishaps during this journey, the cultivation of a maiden of extreme yin was similarly not something that could be achieved just by cultivating bitterly in the depths of the mountain. In the end, they still allowed Feng Yunsheng to travel together with them. Towards Yan Zhaoge, the higher echelon experts of Broad Creed Mountain were currently extremely trusting. Moreover, along the way, other than the Great Western Desert, they would also be passing through the lands of Broad Creed Mountain, with experts sitting over them. Leaving the clan, heading west out of the Central Heaven region, they arrived at the West Heaven region of the Heaven Domain's 5 regions. Continuing west, they left the boundaries of the Heaven Domain, arriving at the Sand region of the Wind Domain's 4 regions. The Sand region was currently also under Broad Creed Mountain's control, with its first seat elder sitting over it. The Wind Domain's 4 regions, in terms of geography, were aligned vertically from north to south, bordering the Great Western Desert together, forming the vast territory of the Wind Domain. The Great Western Desert was virtually a forbidden zone for the living, including the Wind Domain's sacred ground of the past, Black Nightmare Mountain. No one had been able to completely control it. It was rumored that it was a remnant of the power of the Great Calamity. Therefore, it was filled with calamities and tribulations, even possessing destructive power. The competition between Broad Creed Mountain, the Sacred Sun Clan, and Infinite Boundless Mountain in the Wind Domain was mainly launched against the Wind Domain's 4 regions, keeping a respectful distance from the Great Western Desert. Yan Zhaoge was rather interested in this place. To be continued. Chapter 2:15. Because of the natural climate, the scenery of the Wind Domain was completely different from the Heaven Domain. Here, it was a desert scenery in all directions. Not only the Great Western Desert, more than 80% of the entire Wind region was a desert. However, although there were many dangers in other deserts, they were not as dangerous as the Great Western Desert. Feng Yunsheng gazed into the distance. The last time I came to the Wind region was a few years ago. Yan Zhaoge asked nonchalantly, when you were at the Sacred Sun Clan, you came out to temper yourself. Feng Yunsheng's tone was similarly very casual. That's right. Although, as a maiden of extreme yin, we have to keep our whereabouts a secret, there are still some cultivation trials that we have to go through personally. Yan Zhaoge smiled. Is it the Gan region or the Qin region? Before the Battle of the Eastern Tang, the Sacred Sun Clan had been powerful. Of the Wind Domain's 4 regions, other than the southernmost Qin region that bordered the Fire Domain, the Gan region to the north of the Qin region had also been under the Sacred Sun Clan's control. And at that time, Broad Creed Mountain controlled the Sand region to the north of the Gan region, while Infinite Boundless Mountain controlled the northernmost Silver region, the 3 sacred grounds dividing up the 4 regions of the Wind Domain. During the War of the Eastern Tang, Broad Creed Mountain had swept through everything. Other than counterattacking in the Fire Domain, they had similarly launched attacks in the Wind Domain. In order not to alarm Huang Guanglia, the Sacred Sun Clan clenched their teeth, retreating step by step. Of the Qin and Gan regions that had been occupied by the Wind Domain, the northernmost Gan region had all fallen into Broad Creed Mountain's hands. Only after the 3rd Extreme Yin bout, in which Meng Wan won the Extreme Yin crown, did the Sacred Sun Clan stabilize their footing, gaining confidence as they began attempting to regain their lost territory. the lost territories of the fire domain had basically all been recovered, but in the wind domain, Broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun clan clashed once more over the Gan region. Afterwards, because Yen Zhaoge had used the Thunder Element Revival art to trap Infinite Boundless Mountain at Cloud Portent Mountain, the Heaven Domain, the Mountain Domain, and the Water Domain had joined forces, causing the Heavenly Thunder Hall to suffer a great loss. The Sacred Sun clan would also be hard-pressed to maintain their momentum, having no choice but to cease all activities in the Wind Domain. Currently, the Gan continent and the Sand continent were located in the middle of the Wind Domain's 4 continents. Under Broad Creed Mountain's control, the Sacred Sun clan could only retreat to the southernmost Qin region. In the current situation, they should already be thanking the heavens and the earth for being able to protect the Qin region. Feng Yunsheng answered, Gan continent, near the border of the Great Western Desert. Yen Zhaoge nodded. The Sacred Sun clan had also put in a lot of effort in grooming its descendants, willing to let its disciples temper themselves, broadening their knowledge and experience with real sabers and spears, stimulating their potential. That's right. Speaking of which, the Black Nightmare Mountain was destroyed by our sect. I wonder what the ruins look like now. Feng Yunsheng suddenly woke up and asked with a smile. The clan that she was currently speaking of was naturally not the Sacred Sun clan, but Broad Creed Mountain. Yen Zhaoge smiled. The exalted Han Tian was in secluded cultivation that year. The final lord of Black Nightmare Mountain attacked our Broad Creed Mountain, with that purple yang of the Sacred Sun clan also watching from the side. In the end, ancestral master Han Tian came out of seclusion and killed the mountain master of Black Nightmare Mountain on the spot. Then he went to the Wind Domain and trampled on Black Nightmare Mountain's mountain gate. From then on, the 7 great sacred grounds became the 6 great sacred grounds. Zhang Purple Yang should be rejoicing that he didn't really make a move back then, immediately turning tail and fleeing after Ancestor Han Tian left seclusion. Therefore, Ancestor Han Tian only chased him into the mouth of the volcano and called it a day. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a Sacred Sun clan now. It's hard to say. The Purple Sun Marshal Saint Zhang Chao was that Sacred Sun saint whose fate was currently unknown, the most legendary expert in the history of the Sacred Sun clan. It was also precisely after he had suffered a great blow to Broad Creed Mountain's vitality. He had led the Sacred Sun clan to rise to prominence, becoming the new #1 sacred ground. If not for the Heaven Diviner Zhan Shilo releasing the radiance that had previously been concealed beneath the shadow of his elder brother under the pressure of Zhang Chao, and the Sacred Sun clan, Broad Creed Mountain would have been very hard-pressed to walk to where it was today. Feng Yunsheng felt a little yearning. The exalted Han Tian had already suppressed the 8 extremities world, and there was also the Heaven Diviner who had always remained deeply concealed. At that time, our clan was truly flourishing. It is very likely that we were the strongest sacred ground recorded after the Great Calamity. Even now, it is still unprecedented. Yen Zhaoge smiled. Just from the historical records, it was not that the Heaven Diviner had intentionally remained deeply concealed. Instead, his personality was indeed rather simple, more willing to focus on the martial Tao and the culture of before the Great Calamity. Our clan's relevant information before and after the Great Calamity mostly originated from the Heaven Diviner. If not for the exalted Han Tian perishing, our clan suffering a great blow to its vitality, there might never have been anyone who knew how extraordinary the Heaven Diviner was. Hearing his words, Feng Yunsheng nodded. What is more regrettable is that compared to the longevity they should have originally possessed, the 2 of them could be said to have died young. Otherwise, who knows what heights they would have attained. Perhaps she was not as infatuated as Sikong Qing, but Feng Yunsheng was similarly addicted to the martial Tao. Yen Zhaoga was actually the same in this regard. The past is over. We still have to look at the present. Yen Zhaoga pointed towards the north. While there was nothing on the horizon, that was where the Wind Domain's sacred ground, Black Nightmare Mountain, had originally been. Black Nightmare Mountain was flattened by the exalted Han Tian. Now, only its remains can be seen, but they have already been eroded very badly. Glancing at Hu, Feng Yunsheng smiled. I heard that big brother Huang cultivates in the supreme martial arts of Black Nightmare Mountain. Hu grinned. Family had once obtained a portion of Black Nightmare Mountain's legacy, which was relatively complete, and passed it down to me. Yen Zhaoga seemed to have thought of something. Oh, right. While Black Nightmare Mountain was destroyed that year, there were still some survivors who remained concealed, some even having fled into the great western desert. All these years, the descendants of Black Nightmare Mountain have been decreasing in number, but there are still some who remain. Currently, as we travel through the Wind Domain, as compared to those of the Sacred Sun Clan, those descendants of Black Nightmare Mountain and those of the Decimating Abyss are more worthy of our vigilance. Feng Yunsheng nodded. I understand. They did not stop along the way, passing through the West Heaven region, directly entering the territory of the Sand region. Here, Broad Creed Mountain also had a higher echelon expert who assumed the position of first seat elder of the Sand region, presiding over this place. Beneath the first seat elder of the Sand region, there were similarly principal elders and acting elders who were in charge of matters of the various regions. Along the way, Yen Zhaoga had to greet these local principals. While only a little over a year had passed, the current Yen Zhaoga was completely different from when he had first gone to the Eastern Tang. Not to mention that his current late Xiantian cultivation base was already higher than most acting elders. Even principal elders of the martial grandmaster realm no longer treated Yen Zhaoga as a senior, but a junior when interacting with him. Strictly speaking, the Battle of the Eastern Tang was still fine, but after Yen Zhaoga's trip to Cloud Portent Mountain, his position in the clan was truly incomparable to before. Previously, he had always remained at Cloud Portent Mountain, then headed to the east, strangling snow mountains, then to Clear Concealed Lake. After returning to the Heaven Domain, he had always remained in secluded cultivation within the clan. It was only this time that he had once more walked the outer territories controlled by Broad Creed Mountain. Meanwhile, the attitude of the clan's elders who had been sent outside towards Yen Zhaoga had already undergone a heaven-flipping, earth-overturning change, let alone those who had originally belonged to his father's faction or those who were neutral, even those who belonged to his second apprentice Uncle Feng Zhuan's faction. No matter what they thought in their hearts, they could at least still live with him on the surface. At the level of acting elders, they could even be described as extremely respectful, because this youth in front of them was already no longer that junior disciple whom they could use to attack Yendi's weakness and find out where he had gone wrong. The current Yen Zhaoga himself had already begun to occupy a certain position within the clan, and his weight was clearly growing greater and greater. To be continued. Chapter 216. To the martial practitioners of Broad Creed Mountain in the Wind Domain, the changes in Yen Zhaoga's position and the role he could play were more directly felt. Earlier, when the Sacred Sun Clan had counterattacked and fought with Broad Creed Mountain in the Gan region, it had been precisely from the Mountain Domain that news had come that Infinite Boundless Mountain had joined forces with Broad Creed Mountain and Jade Sea City, causing the Sacred Sun Clan, who had intended to reclaim their lost territory, to have no choice but to retreat to the Qin region. The entire Broad Creed Mountain, from the old clan chief Yuan Zhengfeng to the elders, had all praised and revered Yen Zhaoga greatly at that time, because his trip to Cloud Portent Mountain had really been of great significance. Infinite Boundless Mountain's direct enmity with the Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall had far-reaching effects, manifesting in all aspects. From a certain point of view, Yen Zhaoga's thunder element revival art at Cloud Portent Mountain from a great distance away had given his clan a great boost in their battle in the wind domain. Stirring up the world with one's own strength was not as simple as it seemed. The slightest change in the overall situation could cause the situation of a local region to change drastically. Moreover, such a massive change had directly forced the Sacred Sun clan, even with 2 sacred artifacts in their hands, to only be able to take a defensive stance before Guanglia emerged from seclusion. The changes in the situation and the changes in their views were also subtly influencing their stances and decisions. Even as Yen Zhaoga obtained the blessings of his father, Yen Di, he himself displayed increasingly outstanding abilities, which in turn caused Yen Di's reputation to grow stronger. In the Battle of the Eastern Tang, Yen Di had leapfrogged levels, domineeringly defeating the Grand Elder of the Sacred Sun clan, the transcending mortality martial Grandmaster Panbuatai, causing the name of Yen Wudi to resound once more within the martial Grandmaster realm. Currently, in the competition for Broad Creed Mountain's next chief, the original balance of power had finally gradually ceased to exist. Yen Di's momentum began to officially surpass that of his senior apprentice brother Fang Zhuan. Especially in the incident of Clear Concealed Lake, Fang Zhuan had been in charge of leading them, but the result had been extremely dangerous. If not for Yen Zhaoga's all-out attack, if the Great Nine Underworld's door had truly opened, the consequences would have been hard to predict. Fang Zhuan himself was not in the wrong, but Yen Zhaoga was Yen Di's son. It was the direct result of the situation changing between the two sides. It was just that some of Broad Creed Mountain's middle echelons of authority who did not have a firm stance, not being completely bound to Fang Zhuan's faction, began to waver in their hearts. Even if he didn't change his faction, his style was gradually becoming more relaxed. Leave a way out today, so that we can meet again in the future. As a result, they were even more courteous towards Yen Zhaoga. While it was not so blatant, Yen Zhaoga could very directly feel this. Yen Zhaoga's attitude had not changed much from before. Those who needed to socialize and those who needed to visit would do so. However, the target of this trip was the legacy site within the Great Western Desert. Yen Zhaoga also wouldn't linger on the road for too long. The black nightmare storms of the Great Western Desert were fierce for a longer period of time, with the time when they were week limited. If they were delayed, they would have to wait until next year. Although he had some thoughts in his mind, he did not know if he could successfully bring the stone pillar out of the desert. It was still unknown how long it would take to bring it out. Yen Zhaoga habitually prepared more time for himself. The Sand region bordered the Great Western Desert. The one occupying this place was a first-rate power, the Howling Wind Sword sect. Broad Creed Mountain also had a principal elder sitting over it, the first elder of the Howling Wind Sword sect. Within its territory, there were also properties of Broad Creed Mountain. Closest to the Great Western Desert was a city known as Suzhou. Suzhou City was where Yen Zhaoga and the others had left the Sand region. It was the final stop before heading to the Great Western Desert, and could also be considered the westernmost border of Broad Creed Mountain's territory. There was a massive market here for people entering and exiting the Great Western Desert to do business. Like the Earth domain, while the Great Western Desert was filled with many dangers. However, it also produced many unique, rare treasures, attracting martial practitioners of the Eight Extremities world to come adventuring here. Because of this, Suzhou City's flourishing trade was also born. Broad Creed Mountain's acting elder in Suzhou City was surnamed Li, an early Xiantian martial scholar. Elder Li warmly received Yen Zhaoga's group. However, at their first meeting, looking at Pan Pan sitting beneath Yen Zhaoga, Elder Li couldn't help but feel a little dazed. The corners of Yen Zhaoga's mouth twitched slightly. I said, using a panda as a mount is a little. However, He seemed to have been thinking too much. After regaining his wits, Elderly clicked his tongue in wonder. This is that legendary Piccio? It is indeed of high quality, extraordinary. Hearing his words, Yen Zhaoge forcibly resisted the urge to roll his eyes, leaping down from Pan Pan's body, greeting Elderly, "I'll have to trouble you this time." Elderly smiled. "No trouble, no trouble. You are actually also here for the clan's official matters. The things that you sent over to prepare earlier have already been prepared." After checking them, Ahu nodded towards Yen Zhaoge. "Young master, they are all prepared, and also in double portions." Yen Zhaoge said, "I'll have to trouble Elderly." Elderly said, "The environment of the great western desert is, after all, special. For convenience's sake, this old man will enter together with you, acting as your guide." Yen Zhaoge thanked him once more. Since everything had already been prepared, they did not tarry any longer, exiting Suzhou City together. In the distance, a desolate desert appeared before their eyes. Compared to the desert they had passed through earlier, it had an even more brutal feeling to it. Gazing from afar, the great western desert actually seemed to be completely black. Where the heavens and the earth intersected, terrifying black hurricanes were everywhere, connecting the heavens above and descending into the great earth below, wreaking havoc unceasingly. This was still when the black nightmare storms were at their weakest, and they were already like this. If they were at their fiercest, who knew what they would look like, other than Elderly himself? There were also the martial practitioners under his command accompanying them. Along the way, other than the harsh environment, there was nothing else that Yen Zhaoge had to worry about. However, halfway there, a faint light suddenly flashed before their eyes. After identifying it for a moment, Elderly swiveled his head to look at Yen Zhaoge. It's the protective treasure that the Howling Wind Sword sect often uses. There should be people trapped here. Yen Zhaoge looked at their surroundings. The all-encompassing black storms swept up a great amount of sand and dust, obscuring the sky and obscuring the sun. The biting cold black winds resembled steel blades. If no special preparations were made, even the Orochi of peak martial scholars would be unable to withstand them. Protective treasures all have a time limit. If before they are used up and no one from the Howling Wind Sword sect comes over, they will be in danger. Yen Zhaoge said, non-committally, the Howling Wind Sword sect has always been on good terms with our sect. Elder June is a good friend of my father's. If the people of the Howling Wind Sword sect are in danger, we should help them if we can. As the group neared, they helped a few youths avoid the storm. Seeing Yen Zhaoge, the girl at the front instantly lit up. "Brother Yen!" Seeing her, Yen Zhaoge matched the girl's appearance to his memories. Luo, why are you so careless?" The newcomer was someone he knew. It was precisely the youngest daughter of that Elder June of the Howling Wind Sword sect, who could be considered a family friend of Yen Zhaoge's. June Luo chuckled, saying to the two youths beside her, "Haven't you always been curious about what kind of person Brother Yen is? Now, the real person is right before your eyes, ah." The two youths were a little dazed, as though they were in a dream. Only after a long time did they regain their wits, hurriedly bowing to Yen Zhaoge in thanks. Lianing of the Sand Regions, Lien family thanks Broad Creed Young Master for saving my life. Lien Chung of the Sand Regions, Lien family thanks Broad Creed Young Master for saving my life. Chapter 217. Paying attention to Qijin reading, obtaining first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Those students who have not snatched any red packets since the new year will be able to display their skills now. Looking over, Yen Zhaoge saw two youths currently bowing towards him. Yen Zhaoge had heard of the Sand Region's Lien family before when he had come to the Wind Domain this time. It was a second-rate power of the Sand region that was subordinate to the Howling Wind Sword sect. Within the territory controlled by the Lien family, there was a jade sand spring that was rather famous and of extraordinary value. Broad Creed Mountain had an acting elder stationed there, receiving a portion of the spring water every year. However, regarding the Lien family, Yen Zhaoga's understanding was pretty much limited to this. Yen Zhaoga swiveled his head to look at Jun Luo, who said, "I've known Lianing and Lien Cheng since young. Coming out this time, I also didn't think that I would meet them. They were attacked, so I helped out. After repelling the enemy, the three of us were instead trapped by the storm. Luckily, Brother Yen, you passed by." Yen Zhaoga smiled. "This time, you're the beauty saving the hero." Jun Luo wrinkled her nose slightly, also smiling. "That's right." Yen Zhaoga shook his head, smiling as he looked at the Lien brothers again. They were two rather weak-looking youths. Speaking of which, while they were still martial artists, their cultivation bases also limited, they still far surpassed ordinary strong men who did not cultivate in martial arts. However, these two brothers gave off a weak and feminine feeling from their outward appearance. Yen Zhaoga had also seen quite a few males with feminine auras, but two brothers from the same family who were like this were rare. After all, it was rumored that the martial legacy of the Sand region's Lien family walked a more ferocious path. Yen Zhaoga raised his head to look at the sky. "Luo, Luo, in entering the great western desert this time, I have something to do. Bringing you along, not only would it be inconvenient, it would instead put you in more danger, because I want to enter deep into the great western desert." Hearing his words, she nodded sensibly. "I understand." Of the two beside her, Lien Cheng was a little worried, but did not dare to speak, while a conflicted and gloomy expression appeared on Lien Ying's face. "Let's go with Yen Zhaoga." Entering deep into the great western desert was something that they did not even dare to think about. However, if Yen Zhaoga wanted to abandon them, they would not be able to return to the Sand region. Jun Luo, however, was not worried, as she believed that Yen Zhaoga definitely had plans. Yen Zhaoga surveyed his surroundings. He asked elderly, where was the original plan to set up the rendezvous point? When moving in the desert, especially in an environment like the Great Western Desert, it was customary to set up a rendezvous point. Elderly understood Yen Zhaoga's meaning, calculating for a moment before replying, "It would be best if we could advance a little further." Yen Zhaoga nodded. "You are familiar with the situation here. Please make the arrangements." Then he said to Jun Luo and the other two, "I'll bring you along a little further. After setting up a rendezvous point, I'll drop you there. There will be martial artists from our sect watching over you, so you just wait there. I'll bring you out of the desert. If I have to stay for too long, I'll arrange for someone else to send you back." Jun Luo and the other two instantly let out sighs of relief, Jun Luo smiling. "This time, we've really troubled Brother Yen and the various seniors of Broad Creed Mountain." As everyone set off, Jun Luo's mind relaxed, her attention instantly drawn by Pan Pan. Although Pan Pan had now completely let go of his body, his size was a little too huge, even larger than an ordinary elephant. However, when he was not encountering an enemy, he would always have that charmingly naive look on his face, causing the little girl to rather like him. Seeing Jun Luo leaping entirely onto Pan Pan's body, her body sinking into the thick fur, her movements of rubbing against him, Yen Zhaoga couldn't help but smile. "Your cultivation is still shallow. How did you end up in a place like the Great Western Desert?" Jun Luo laughed a little awkwardly. Her eyes swiveled about. Yen Zhaoga rolled his eyes. "Yearning for the days where you wield your sword in the pugilistic world, indulging in your passions as you please? Feel that there's no place under the vast heavens and earth that you can't go? Want to properly look at the long-famed..." unique sceneries of the world? Jun Luo chuckled. It's mainly because I heard Brother Yin tell me many stories about this when I was young. Yin Zhaoge was amused by this rather boyish girl. Oh, so you're blaming me? Jun Luo hurriedly waved her hands, smiling. I don't dare, I don't dare. After we return, I'll still have to ask Brother Yin to put in a few good words for me. Yin Zhaoge smiled. In coming here this time, I originally wanted to pay a visit to Uncle Jun passing by the Howling Wind Sword sect. However, he has yet to return from his travels. If you can reach the Howling Wind Sword sect before he returns. Jun Luo's eyes lit up. Definitely, definitely. At that time, Brother Yin, remember to hide it from me. Before she had finished, she heard Yin Zhaoge continue. After this, I'll still have to mention it to Uncle Jun. Jun Luo was instantly stunned, resembling a frosted eggplant. Feng Yinsheng and Ahu were both laughing happily as they looked at this scene rather interestedly. Looking at Jun Luo acting like a spoiled child in front of Yen Zhaoge, Lian Cheng and Lian Ying's gazes revealed uncontrollable envy. Afterwards, they set up a meeting point. With the help of specially made talismans and supplementary treasures, they jointly established a fixed formation that could be sustained for a certain amount of time, keeping the sandstorms of the outside world at bay. A few capable Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners stayed behind under Elder Li's orders to look after them, as did Jun Luo's trio. Yen Zhaoge and the others continued on their way. Their destination had already been opened up by Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners earlier, just that with the intensity of the black nightmare storm earlier, the path had gradually been buried once more. However, with traces of it still present, it was much easier for Yen Zhaoge's group to continue on. After a long, arduous journey, that damaged stone pillar that stood erect in the desert finally appeared before their eyes. Yen Zhaoge's gaze was fixated on the patterns on the stone pillar, not speaking for a long time. Elder Li waved his hands, dispersing along with his subordinates, setting up the formation once more, keeping the sandstorms at bay. While they had arrived at their destination, Yen Zhaoge's journey this time was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. At the same time, Elder Li, who was an acting elder, did not have the authority to come into contact with such precious remains, much less the martial practitioners under him. Elder Li was extremely law-abiding, fulfilling his duty as well. Other than acting as Yen Zhaoge's guide, having arrived at the place, he stood guard outside. Elder Li, I really didn't think that young Master Yen would actually be so knowledgeable about these ancient ruins. A middle-aged martial practitioner followed beside Elder Li, following him behind a sand dune as he sighed in admiration. Even more unexpectedly, young Master Yen actually possesses the authority of a first-seat elder. Elder Li said, "Don't underestimate him. He is someone with true ability, being able to achieve what he has today. It is not entirely due to Elder Yan's protection." As he said this, Elder Li suddenly felt a sharp pain on his back. I know, otherwise there would also be no need to go through so many twists and turns. The middle-aged martial practitioner beside him said smilingly. Elder Li could only feel his life rapidly flowing away. He opened his mouth, yet was unable to utter a sound. He swiveled his head in shock to look at this middle-aged man, who should have been his trusted aide, only to see an even more horrifying scene. The other party was smiling, but his facial features were actually slowly changing, becoming more and more like Elder Li himself. P.S. Children chasing updates. Do you still have any free appreciation votes and Qijin coins? 515 red packet rankings countdown. I'll pull some votes, asking for more in appreciation votes, making a final push. To be continued. Chapter 218. Pay attention to Qijin reading and get the first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Students who haven't grabbed red packets since the new year can now show their skills. Elder Li felt his thoughts slowing down. but looking at the middle-aged man whose appearance was gradually changing, a thought suddenly popped into his mind: imitation killing jade. The rare treasure, the imitation killing jade, was a consumable item that was extremely rare. It had not appeared in the world for many years, and most people thought that it was already extinct after killing a target within a certain period of time. The user could use his own flesh aura to imitate the target he had killed. The middle-aged man was not of Broad Creed Mountain's direct lineage, instead being a talent that Elder Lee had personally recruited from outside. He had already followed him for many years, always loyal and devoted, even having saved his life before. But today, the other party bared his fangs and assassinated him. What made Elder Lee even more shocked was the meaning behind the other party's words. There was clearly a greater scheme. Having killed him with an imitation killing jade, this person would be able to impersonate him for a short period of time. Even with his inner chi, as long as he did not fight, even other Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners would be hard-pressed to distinguish him. Yao Shan. Elder Lee wanted to shout, but found that he couldn't make a single sound. The cultivation of the person in front of him was far beyond what he remembered in the past. He could only watch as the other party gradually took on his appearance, which was remarkably lifelike. Yao Shan, who had already taken on the appearance of Elder Lee, smiled. "Don't worry, I've been with you for so long. I can roughly imitate 90% of your habits, style, movements, and tone of voice. No one else will be able to see through it. As for why I disappeared." As Yao Shan spoke, he took out a shadow shrinking pouch. The shadow shrinking pouch opened, and a figure jumped out. Elder Lee's eyes widened as another Yao Shan appeared in front of him. Yao Shan smiled and said, "This isn't an imitation kill jade. It's my companion who disguised himself as me. He is also very familiar with my habits. I won't reveal any flaws. Moreover, compared to you, I'm much more inconspicuous. As long as I don't disappear for no reason, I'll be able to find you. Or maybe I'm trying to attract attention so that no one will notice me. I didn't cause much of a commotion when I killed you. Although there were fluctuations of stellar energy, it was very normal. We drove the beasts in the desert away. We have to make a move." Elder Lee's eyes were still wide open, but his life had already left him. Yao Shan smiled. "I had a good time with you. Have a good journey." After saying that, he tidied up the things on Elder Lee's body and transferred them to himself, before keeping Elder Lee's corpse into his shadow shrinking pouch. Keeping the shadow shrinking pouch properly, Yao Shan dusted off his sleeves and exchanged glances with his companion, who had transformed into him, and smiled. The two of them, one in front and one behind, continued to walk forward like the real Elder Lee and Yao Shan, as if nothing had happened. In front of the stone pillars, Yen Zhaoge stood with his hands behind his back, earnestly looking at the patterns on the stone pillar. I did not see wrongly. It is indeed a pillar of the divine palace that year, having fallen here after breaking off. Looking at the damaged and broken stone pillar, Yen Zhaoge fell into deep thought. These marks of damage are not simple. I'm afraid that it really was not a simple natural disaster, but rather a man-made disaster. Yen Zhaoge raised his head slightly. If it really was a man-made disaster, who exactly was it that caused all of this? Even such a powerful divine palace has been destroyed. The entire world has suffered a calamity. To be able to change the world, to be able to do this, although it was somewhat illusory and unreal, it might be very far away from the current him. However, Yen Zhaoge still felt a shadow cast over his heart, as though a great mountain was pressing down on him. This was pressure. Perhaps it was not direct enough, but it was much greater than that of the Sacred Sun clan and Huang Guanglia. The current situation of the Eight Extremities world could still be balanced, could be gambled, could be chased, could be resisted, could be defeated. However, if that power that could destroy the heavens and the earth, resembling a world-ending tribulation, descended once more, how would they survive it? Perhaps, in Yen Zhaoge's entire life, such a tribulation would not occur once more. However, perhaps it would happen tomorrow? Yen Zhaoge closed his eyes. After a long time, when he reopened them, his gaze was already calm. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Yen Zhaoge muttered, extending his palm forward, pressing it on the broken and damaged pillar of the divine palace before him. Yen Zhaoge's aura-chi infused into the pillar of the divine palace. On that damaged pillar, numerous patterns of light lit up, extending along the patterns on its surface. However, as soon as they reached the crack, the light patterns broke apart, also beginning to dissipate, turning into specks of light dust dissipating within the air. However, even so, numerous formless waves, with the stone pillar as their center, expanded outwards in all directions, dispersing a great amount of wind and sand. Looking at the fracture of the stone pillar, Yen Zhaoge could not help but knit his brows slightly. After pondering for a moment, Yen Zhaoge infused his aura-chi once more, the light patterns on the stone pillar lighting up once more. As the light patterns extended to the fracture once more, the light suddenly became even brighter and more dazzling, also more condensed and tangible. The formless and intangible radiance seemed to have taken on a tangible form at this moment, no longer relying on the stone pillar at a slow yet stable speed, instead continuing to extend amidst the air. The light patterns that contained infinite profundities seemed to entangle a complete stone pillar within the air just like that, continuing to interweave and circulate, coiling around the formless stone pillar that did not exist. The light patterns circulated, becoming more and more complete, the spiritual chi that emanated from within also becoming more and more majestic, unceasingly shaking the surrounding space. From within that originally broken stone pillar, the profound concept also gradually became complete, causing one to feel that it was hard to grasp, yet also shocking to the soul. Yen Zhaoge's expression was focused as he instead closed his eyes. Within his mind, that existence buried within the depths of his memories gradually surfaced once more. The majestic divine palace stood above the 9 heavens. The stone pillar buried within the desert suddenly began to shake, accompanied by the shaking of the stone pillar. With it as its center, numerous spirit patterns extended far into the distance within the desert, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, their auras violent. The surrounding sand dunes all began to undulate intensely. At this moment, the desert seemed to have become an ocean, wild winds rampaging, waves surging. By the side, Ahu and Feng Yunsheng both had solemn expressions on their faces as they barely managed to stabilize themselves. Yen Zhaoge's expression was as per usual. After a while, he let out a long breath, ceasing the infusing of his aura-chi into the stone pillar. The turbulent desert finally regained its original state, but on the ground, numerous light patterns that resembled fissures still extended outwards in all directions. As the light patterns on the stone pillar lit up, those light patterns that seemed to have restored the broken stone pillar to a complete state in midair, still congregated in midair, not dissipating. Looking at the stone pillar, Yen Zhaoge fell into a slight daze as he pondered. Indeed, it has merged together with the terrain of the great western desert. Under such circumstances, if I want to pull the stone pillar out and take it away, I'm afraid that I'll have to first undergo an initial refinement on the spot. Guarding by the side, Ahu's heart suddenly jolted slightly. Turning his head, he saw Elder Li and a few of his subordinates returning, seemingly having something to report to Yen Zhaoge. P.S. Children chasing updates. Do you still have any free appreciation tickets and Qijin coins? The countdown for the 515 red packet ranking is starting. I'm here to ask for more and appreciation tickets. One last push. To be continued. Chapter 219. Paying attention to Chidian reading, obtaining first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Those students who haven't snatched any red packets since the new year can now display their skills. Seeing Elderly return, Ahu couldn't help but ask, "What happened?" Elderly's expression was somewhat grave. "The weather seems to be changing. A black dragon dread might erupt here within a short period of time." Hearing his words, Ahu couldn't help but pull back the corners of his mouth. Before entering the Great Western Desert this time, he had also crammed in some knowledge regarding the Great Western Desert with Yen Zhaoga, having heard of the famous Black Dragon Dread before. The so-called Black Dragon Dread was a black nightmare storm, suddenly strengthening within a small area for a short period of time, forming a terrifying storm that far surpassed its usual strength. Generally speaking, Black Dragon Dreads left as quickly as they came, but their destructive power would be extremely shocking. Imitating Yen Zhaoga, Ahu stroked his lower chin. "Our current barrier formation can't withstand it." Elderly nodded, very hard. Looking at the signs of the changes in the weather, this wave of Black Dragon Dread will be extremely fierce, and our current methods will not be able to withstand it. Ahu smacked his lips. "I'll go ask young master." Hearing Ahu's report, Yen Zhaoga pondered for a moment before saying, "It's fine. Get everyone to close to the stone pillar. If a Black Dragon Dread really attacks, leave it to me to deal with. I am currently in the process of refining this stone pillar. If we retreat now, not only would all our previous efforts be wasted, it might even result in the opposite, causing the stone pillar to be sucked into the ground by the terrain of the desert, being completely buried by it. At that time, wanting to take it out again would be difficult." Hearing this, Ahu nodded. "I understand. I'll go inform them right now." The big man turned and walked away, returning before Elderly. He conveyed Yen Zhaoga's decision to temporarily not leave. Glancing somewhat worriedly at Yen Zhaoga, Elderly finally still nodded. "All right, this old man will go inform the others right now." The people scattered in the outskirts gathered towards the area where the stone pillar was located once more. However, under Elderly's lead and arrangements, they still didn't approach the stone pillar and Yen Zhaoga. Everyone stood facing outwards, still on guard, but behind them was the stone pillar that flickered with a profound radiance. He was still attracting everyone's attention. Although he did not understand what was going on, just looking at the light patterns on the stone pillar, he could sense that there was a boundless profundity contained within. And standing beneath the stone pillar, Yen Zhaoga gave everyone the feeling that this youth seemed to be gradually merging as one with the stone pillar. The real Yao Shan, the current Elderly, seemingly unintentionally glanced back at Yen Zhaoga and the stone pillar, muttering to himself within his heart, "As expected, he has some skill. His reputation is not undeserved." The martial artist disguised as Yao Shan was right beside him. "Didn't you say that he's only here to survey the ruins? What did he want to do now? Could it be that you want to take the stone pillar away from the desert by yourself?" When Broad Creed Mountain's peak martial grandmaster experts came here previously, they were also unable to uproot the stone pillar. Elderly muttered. Looking at his appearance, he does indeed have this intention. However, whether or not he can fulfill his wish is another matter entirely. Yao Shan laughed lightly. Even if he really has a way, the Black Dragon Dread will arrive soon. There's not much time left for him. Elderly narrowed his eyes, his gaze deep and distant. This ruin is rather valued by Broad Creed Mountain's lineage. Although it was only an acting elder like Oldly who accompanied this Yen Zhaoga in, it is very likely that there will be martial grandmaster experts standing guard in the surroundings, creating a safe zone. Therefore, our clan's martial grandmaster experts also cannot get close, only able to do something from afar, thinking of a way to bring up the Black Dragon Dread. At that time, it will still be up to us to make a move. Hearing his words, his companion nodded lightly. With the attack of the Black Dragon Dread, the situation will definitely be chaotic. I hope that you will have a chance to make a move at that time. Elderly said, other than creating chaos, the Black Dragon Dread is more importantly trying to exhaust the power of that sacred artifact fragment of his. Otherwise, even if we make a move, it will also be hard to succeed. Other than that, that retainer of his who never leaves his side seems to be a heavenly connection martial scholar. Only then will it be easy to make a move. He sucked in a deep breath. This aspect will be left to you when the time comes. Don't force it. If you can draw it away, that will already be a success. Yao Shan nodded. Rest easy, I understand. A cold light flickered within Elder Li's pupils. Zhan Donga, you destroyed my black nightmare lineage that year. Retribution will fall on your descendants. Our clan has still not perished. With your broad Creed Mountain, we will not rest until death. The two black nightmare descendants both had respectful expressions on their faces, but were actually looking coldly at that stone pillar and Yen Zhaoga, standing beneath the stone pillar. Yen Zhaoga extended his palm, once more, pressing it on its surface. On the back of his hand, numerous patterns of light shockingly appeared, the same as those on the surface of the stone pillar. The patterns of light on the surface of the stone pillar resembled flowing water, flowing along the stone pillar to Yen Zhaoga's back, extending unceasingly towards his wrist and forearm. A great amount of light surfaced within Yen Zhaoga's mind, one scene after another flashing within. Vaguely, it was as though a massive palm had descended from the heavens, slamming down onto the divine palace. Seeing this scene, Yen Zhaoga abruptly awoke, regaining his wits. And that massive stone pillar inserted within the desert shook once more, the earth quaking and mountains shaking, ripples that resembled flowing water expanding unceasingly in all directions. The vast desert once again resembled the surface of the sea, rising and falling by the side. Ahu, Feng, Yunsheng, Pan Pan, as well as Elder Li, and the others in the periphery, all shook along with the ground beneath their feet. Finally, the quaking of the great earth regained its calm. That stone pillar still stood where it was, as though it had completely become one with the great desert. Within the gazes of Elder Li and Yao Shan, undetectable mocking and complacent flashed past. They gazed into the distance. It's here. While the quaking of the great earth had subsided, the storm within the sky was growing stronger and stronger. The sky before them had already turned completely black, the terrifying black hurricane resembling numerous black dragons filling the heavens and the earth, rampaging rampantly. The black hurricane that roared in rage enveloped the heavens and covered the earth as it assaulted Yen Zhaoga and the others. Gazing back, Yen Zhaoga quietly looked at the black nightmare storm that was rapidly strengthening nearby. The various barriers and restrictions that the people of Broad Creed Mountain had set up in the surroundings under the assault of the storm could not help but tremble. The sudden arrival of the Black Dragon Dread had already surpassed the defensive limits of the barrier formation. Having often traversed the great desert, they were also prepared for the sudden arrival of the Black Dragon Dread. They of Broad Creed Mountain immediately began stabilizing the barrier formation. However, this could only be maintained for a rather short period of time. As time passed, the barrier formation finally began to collapse. Everyone looked at Yen Zhaoga. There, the stone pillar still stood on the ground. Yen Zhaoga's expression was calm. Gather over here. They all approached Yen Zhaoga and the stone pillar together. Behind them, the terrifying storm broke through the barrier formation, the all-encompassing black winds sweeping madly. Elder Li and Yao Shan lowered their eyelids, concealing the cold light within their eyes as they rushed towards Yen Zhaoga together with everyone else. P.S. Children chasing updates. Do you still have any free favored tickets and Chijian coins? The countdown for the 515 red packet ranking is starting. I'll poll for votes, requesting for additional favored tickets and favored tickets, making a final push. To be continued. Chapter 220. Paying attention to Chijian reading, obtaining first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Those students who have not snatched any red packets since the new year can now display their skills. Everyone drew closer to Yen Zhaoge and the stone pillar, the surface of that stone pillar flickering with a long radiance. The illusory patterns of light condensed in the air, not dissipating, seemed to be reconstructing the broken and missing parts of the stone pillar. Standing beneath the stone pillar, Yen Zhaoge pressed one hand on its surface, the index finger of his other hand lightly tapping on his dantian. His gaze was fixated on the black storm that had broken through the barrier formation and was assaulting him. The attention of Elder Li and Yao Shan was focused on Yen Zhaoge and Ahu, as well as Pan Pan, who had already retreated to Yen Zhaoge's side. Looking at the storm sweeping over towards them, Yen Zhaoge's gaze flickered unceasingly as he rapidly calculated within his heart. Within his dantian, the clear qi dispersed, the chaotic qi mass surging unceasingly. As his aura qi circulated, it suddenly contained a miraculous, unique rhythm, distant yet vigorous. Others were unable to sense its existence, and even if they felt it, they would also be unable to understand it, unable to identify it. Yen Zhaoge's palm pressing on the surface of the stone pillar, infusing it with his aura qi grew denser and denser, causing the patterns of light on its surface to grow even more dazzling. Everyone rushed over to Yen Zhaoge's side, looking nervously at him. Looking back, the terrifying black nightmare storm currently resembled numerous vicious dragons that soared into the heavens and entered the earth. Where the storm passed, numerous ravines were plowed out in the desert, many undulating sand dunes being flattened, a great amount of sand sweeping through the air. From Yen Zhaoge's vision, he could even see those tiny grains of sand, after being swept into the storm, shattering into even finer specks of dust. Where the storm passed, the sand that buried the stone pillar. Because the stone pillar was connected to the desert, it was still stable as Mount Tai. However, those standing on the desert were destined to be hard-pressed to escape, their bodies ripped apart by the violent storm. The storm was already right before their eyes. As Yen Zhaoge still did not make any movements, everyone began to feel uneasy. While there was no commotion, everyone's gazes were filled with unconcealable anxiety. Previously, because of Yen Zhaoge's decision, they had not retreated in time to avoid the Black Dragon Dread. With the assault of the Black Dragon Dread at this moment, if Yen Zhaoge had no way of dealing with it, other than himself, everyone else would be buried here with him. The others didn't think that Yen Zhaoge had intentionally tricked them, because Yen Zhaoge himself was similarly in danger. But now that the storm was upon them and they had no countermeasures, it was inevitable that they would be greatly disappointed. Elder Li and Yao Shan looked at each other. He is not allowed to use the power of the sacred weapon fragment. Was it because he couldn't bear to part with it? Or was it because he couldn't activate it? Without the saint artifact fragment, where does his confidence come from? If that sacred weapon fragment of his was actually unable to be activated, then we wouldn't even need to create the Black Dragon Fiend. The fake Yao Shan was a little vexed. Now that the Black Dragon Fiend has attacked, we've lost ourselves as well. Elder Li's gaze was gloomy. Although I am somewhat unwilling, if that is the case, then it is fate. Burying the #1 person of Broad Creed Mountain's younger generation, a monstrous genius in his early 20s who is able to shake the entire world as a martial scholar, would not be a loss for us. He snorted coldly. Be more vigilant. Maybe he's just heartless and selfish. He has a way to protect himself, so he's not afraid. If that's really the case, We have to make use of this final chance to send him on his way. In just this short instant, the terrifying storm had already arrived before them. The few people standing at the outermost perimeter, unable to stand stably, their bodies were actually unable to remain standing on the ground, as they were directly about to be swept into midair. Seeing this, everyone's expressions changed. The shadow of death, enveloping everyone, danger was already close at hand. Just at this time, Yen Zhaoge's hands pressed down on the stone pillar. The stone pillar, that flickered with patterns of light, shook intensely, numerous rays of light shooting out in all directions. Radiance that resembled chains. Resembling numerous chains, they extended into the rampaging storm at the speed of lightning. For just that one moment, time and space seemed to freeze. The terrifying black storm appeared sluggish in midair, resembling a still image. Within the black wind, colorful radiance rapidly extended, intermingling with the storm. The next moment, time seemed to have stopped for a moment, moving once more, the violent storm still lunging towards them. However, at this moment, on the sand beneath their feet, numerous thick spirit patterns appeared once more, filling the entire area of the nearby desert. Numerous rays of spiritual light shot into the sky, enveloping Yen Zhaoge and the surrounding people, isolating them from the storm once more. Amidst their shock, they saw that the numerous rays of radiance emanating from the stone pillar were still mixed together with the storm, dancing madly within the air along with the piercing strong winds. Yen Zhaoge exhaled, shouting, "Condense!" Spiritual light flickered at the area where the entire stone pillar glowed with radiance, the light actually extending unceasingly, filling up the center of that empty pattern of light. It was as though the broken stone pillar had once more grown out, wanting to recover its original form. Seeing this scene, everyone, elderly and Yao Shan included, were all rendered wide-eyed and tongue-tied. Could it be that he can really pull this stone pillar out from the great western desert? Even peak martial grandmaster experts can't do it. When the broken stone pillar stopped growing, enveloped by the radiance, its external outline seemed to be nearing completion. Yen Zhaoge let out a low roar once more. "Rise!" With Yen Zhaoge's low roar, the numerous rays of radiance that extended out from the stone pillar abruptly straightened. The black storm that had originally brought them the threat of death now resembled 1,000 mighty divinities simultaneously grabbing these radiant chains with their hands before exerting force. The great desert beneath the stone pillar shook mightily, unprecedentedly, intensely. At this moment, the surrounding heavens and earth seemed to be shaking as well. Then, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, that stone pillar that seemed to have been completely forged together with the desert, flickering with infinite radiance, rose from the ground. The massive stone pillar rose up bit by bit from the desert, breaking free of the imprisonment of the great western desert. The desert beneath their feet shook unceasingly, the radiance that protected them weakening unceasingly. However, that rampaging storm above their heads was currently unable to cause them any harm, as it was instead completely locked in a contest of strength with the stone pillar. While they were not clear on the specifics, not knowing how Yen Zhaoge had done it, everyone gradually came to a realization. He is borrowing the power of the natural disaster of the great western desert itself, countering and merging with the imprisonment of that stone pillar by the great western desert. Everyone couldn't help but exclaim in admiration within their hearts. A martial scholar is actually able to borrow the power of heavenly phenomena. This is really too inconceivable, too terrifying. How exactly is he able to do this? Elderly and Yao Shan, after regaining their wits, exchanged looks. He is borrowing our power to create the Black Dragon Dread. If not for the Black Dragon Dread having been set off, causing the storm in the surrounding area to abruptly strengthen, it would probably not have been so easy for Yen Zhaoge to directly uproot the stone pillar with the black nightmare storm of this area. Realizing that their side had instead helped Yen Zhaoga, the faces of the two turned a little green, as though they had swallowed a dead rat hole. P.S. Children chasing updates. Do you still have any free favored tickets and Chidian coins? The countdown for the 515 red packet ranking is starting. I'll poll for votes, requesting for additional favored tickets and favored tickets, making a final push. To be continued. Chapter 221. Broadcast. Pay attention to Chidian reading and receive first-hand news of the 515 red packets. Students who haven't snatched any red packets since the new year can now show off their skills. The radiance surrounding the stone pillar rippled in the air, transforming into ribbons of light that were pulled taut by the black nightmare storm. The taut force forcefully pulled the stone pillar out of the desert. In the instant that the stone pillar was completely pulled out of the desert, a majestic force suddenly spread out in all directions. Under the violent waves, the black nightmare storm that was wreaking havoc in the surroundings was directly cleared away. The sand and dust in the air were completely crushed into dust and blown away into the distance. If one were to look down from the 9 heavens above, one would see that within the desert that was enveloped by the black storm, a blank space had suddenly appeared. Where the stone pillar had originally stood, the vast desert had almost been flattened, forming a huge depression in the sand. That stone pillar floated in midair. The radiance that extended out had already been completely retracted, leaving only the stone pillar itself, enveloped by the radiance. The radiance on the surface of the stone pillar gradually dissipated, and in the eyes of everyone, they saw that the original fracture had shockingly been repaired. The entire stone pillar had become one, as if it had been renewed. Looking at the huge stone pillar before them, then turning their somewhat stiff necks to look at the surrounding sky that had suddenly become clear, everyone finally regained their wits, letting out a cheer in unison. The movements of Elder Li and Yao Shan were slightly slower, but they also immediately revealed joyful expressions, joining the ranks of the others. It was just that when the two of them looked at each other, their gazes were slowly filled with gloominess and gloom. The real Yao Shan sucked in a deep breath, calming his emotions, sending a sound transmission with his Orochi to his companion. Don't act rashly. Right now, there's no way to confirm whether that sacred artifact fragment of his can be used. The fake Yao Shan by the side answered, I understand. Although he said this, his tone couldn't help but contain a bit of gnashing teeth. The stone pillar slowly fell down. Ahu saw this. Seeing this, Ahu hurriedly prepared to catch it. Yen Zhaoga had just said, Let me, when Ahu's hand had already reached out. Who knew that just as his palm touched the bottom of the stone pillar, his expression would suddenly change greatly, only feeling a boundless force pressing down on his palm, causing his wrist to nearly be dislocated. Just by looking at the stone pillar's appearance, although he was huge in size, Ahu was already a grandmaster martial arts practitioner at the peak of the reaching heaven state. With a shake of his arms, his gang chi erupted with all his might, and the strength of his flesh and blood was more than 10,000 kilograms. But now, with the support of the stone pillar, however, he felt that he couldn't bear it at all, so he could only let go and retreat. Standing by the side, Yen Zhaoga also extended his hand, placing it beneath the stone pillar. A scene which caused Ahu's eyeballs to nearly pop out of their sockets appeared. The stone pillar, which he would not have been able to support even if he were to erupt with all his strength, was actually easily supported by Yen Zhaoga with just a single hand. And from the looks of it, Yen Zhaoga was clearly extremely relaxed. The others who were watching from the side were also shocked because of his identity and daily behavior. Ahu would always be looked down upon, intentionally or unintentionally. However, as Yen Zhaoga gained more and more attention from the outside world, everything around him changed. Therefore, the outside world knew more and more about Ahu. This big fellow, who often followed by Yen Zhaoge's side, claiming to be his retainer, was a peak expert amongst martial scholars. Many people were even speculating in private about who exactly was stronger between him and Yen Zhaoge, master and servant. Just now, when Ahu lifted the stone pillar, all the gang qi in his body burst out. The vigorous power shocked everyone. Usually, Ahu did not show the spiritual light on the top of his head, but when he exerted force just now, spiritual light surged, piercing through the horizon. It was actually a completely real radiance, clearly showing his heavenly connection realm cultivation. But it was precisely such a Tongtian grandmaster. The stone pillar, which he had not been able to lift with all his strength, had instead been easily lifted by Yen Zhaoge with just a single hand, causing everyone to feel horrified. Looking at the deeply affected, the corners of Yen Zhaoge's mouth twitched slightly. This stone pillar is very special. The concept of power contained within it is very profound. Many martial grandmasters can't even lift it. The reason why I can lift it up is because I've refined this stone pillar in the beginning and integrated my martial arts fist intent into it. That's why it's heavier than a mountain to you, but lighter than a straw to me. The bystanders came to a sudden realization. Ahu rubbed the back of his head and grinned. Young master, the fact that you can refine this stone pillar is a testament to your ability. Hearing his words, the others all nodded. If it were any other time, Yen Zhaoge would be extremely happy to be surrounded by such admiring gazes. But now, while his expression didn't change much, his emotions were actually very complex, as he didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Looking at the stone pillar in his hands, Yen Zhaoge resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Lifting up such a huge fella, it really was awe-inspiring, filled with a great visual impact, extremely shocking. However, if he had to carry this stone pillar all the way back from the wind domain to the heaven domain's broad Creed Mountain, that might not be very pleasant, especially when Yen Zhaoge still had no way of handing it over to someone else. Because of the uniqueness of this stone pillar, even if it was pulled by a carriage carried by a beast, or carried by many people, it would still be hard to succeed. And yet, Yen Zhaoge was still unable to make it shrink. In other words, if the situation didn't change, Yen Zhaoge would have to personally carry this huge fella all the way back to Broad Creed Mountain, and he would have to walk back. If he rode on it, let alone other beasts, even Pan would be crushed to the ground. Just think about it. Having a domineering steed like Pan by his side was already very attention-grabbing. Now, he had to carry a thick stone pillar that was over 20 meters long. That scene would really be too beautiful, to the point that people couldn't bear to look at it. Actually, while carrying such a huge fellow was a little silly, it was still rather eye-catching. The corners of Yen Zhaoge's mouth twitched. He rather liked to be in the limelight, swaggering through the streets, but the prerequisite was that this was something that he wanted to do, something that he could control. When he wanted to be in the limelight, he would be in the limelight. When he wanted to be low-key, he would be low-key. This was life. If he was forced to be in the limelight, going to be in the eyes of others, that would really make him a little unhappy. This thing, Yen Zhaoge thought rather maliciously, is actually pretty good for smashing people with. While trying to find joy amidst bitterness, Yen Zhaoge sighed within his heart, not showing it in the slightest on the surface. Holding the stone pillar with one hand, he stroked the patterns on its surface with the other, looking like he was seriously analyzing and studying them. As Yen Zhaoge dealt with the stone pillar, he said to Ahu and the others, "With our objective achieved, the black nightmare storm will rise again very soon. Let's leave this place." In the distance, the storm that had been dispersed was already surging towards them once more. They hurriedly followed behind Yen Zhaoge, heading back the way they had come. Elderly, and Yao Shan felt extremely defeated, but on the surface, they still forced out smiles as they followed Yan Zhaoge's footsteps. The storm arose once more, causing their return journey to become much more difficult. After a long and arduous journey, they finally returned to the meeting point that they had set up earlier. A few broad Creed Mountain Martial practitioners were currently waiting there with Jun Luo and the other two. P.S. Children chasing updates. Do you still have any free favored tickets and Qijin coins? The countdown for the 515 red packet rankings is starting. I'm here to pull for votes, asking for additional favored tickets and favored tickets, making a final push. To be continued. Chapter 222. Qijian's Anniversary Celebration. The day with the most benefits. Other than the gift bag and the school bag, this time's 515 red envelope frenzy was definitely a must. There was no reason not to snatch the red envelopes. Set the alarm clock, seeing Yan Zhaoge appear before them with that massive stone pillar. Jun Luo and the others all had dazed looks on their faces, not recovering for a long time. Looking at Yan Zhaoge, Jun Luo, who had originally been eloquent, actually stuttered a little. Brother Yan, what is this thing, ah? Yan Zhaoge had a nonchalant expression on his face. In entering the great western desert this time, I originally had an errand to attend to investigate some remains. As for this thing, it's an item from the ruins. It's quite valuable, so we have to find a way to bring it back to the sect. Looking at the massive object propped up by Yan Zhaoge's palm, Jun Luo could not help but swallow her saliva. If I were to bring it back to Broad Creed Mountain, if it were to be like this all the way, wouldn't that be a little too spectacular? Yan Zhaoge raised his brows slightly, saying in a persuasive tone, Luo, haven't you always been looking forward to the life of the pugilistic world? There's no need to explain a flashy life. Jun Luo's little face scrunched up like a bun as she muttered softly, I keep feeling that it's not like this. Yan Zhaoge smiled, not answering. Among them, his heart was filled with sighs. Jun Luo and the others were just the beginning. He could foresee that, for a very long time in the future, he would have to face similar problems from others. What made Yan Zhaoge's head hurt a little was that this was not his original intention. However, even though he had refined the stone pillar, it was still limited to uprooting it from the ground. Yan Zhaoge was well aware of the origins of this stone pillar. It was none other than a broken pillar of the divine palace that year which had fallen into this world. However, after this pillar of the divine palace had broken apart, Yan Zhaoge still had to carefully study and analyze whether or not any other changes had occurred within. The result was that Yan Zhaoge was currently still unable to freely control this massive stone pillar. He could only let it be as big as it was. The radiance that had chased away the black dragon dread disappeared in a flash. At this moment, it had already disappeared. Even the light patterns on the surface of the stone pillars gradually dimmed and no longer shone. Apart from the unusual change in weight, everything seemed extremely ordinary, which was hard to believe. Just now, it was this stone pillar that shook the surrounding heaven and earth. Yan Zhaoge had once fantasized that when an enemy provoked him, he could just smash them to death with a stone pillar. For now, unless the other party was directly under his palm, he could only think about it, raising the stone pillar and swinging it horizontally or vertically. There was temporarily no need to consider it. Yan Zhaoge had already experimented, and currently the stone pillar could only be maintained in an upright position. As soon as the stone pillar tilted, Yan Zhaoge's palm would immediately shake intensely. At the same time as it shook, the stone pillar abruptly grew heavy. Every time that happened, he would feel what Ahu had felt at that time. The stone pillar seemed to be infinitely heavy. Holding it in his hand, he felt as if his wrist was about to be dislocated or even broken. However, As time passed, Yen Zhaoge could vaguely feel that his connection with that stone pillar was getting closer and closer. The scene that flashed before his eyes became clearer and clearer. The weight of the stone pillar also became lighter and lighter. Even though it was slanted, its weight was still increasing rapidly. However, Yen Zhaoge was gradually beginning to grasp the intricacies of it, becoming more and more relaxed. The only problem was that the stone pillar was unable to shrink to the point that Yen Zhaoge had to constantly carry such a huge fella through the streets. It was still fine in the deep mountains and ancient forests. At least there was shelter. In the great desert, while there were sand dunes rising and falling, not truly being completely visible if one were to constantly carry a massive stone pillar over 20 meters in length, it would still be incomparably eye-catching. The wind domain and the great western desert are not peaceful. Yen Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. It's practically like the words "come hit me" are written on my face, seeing Yen Zhaoge and Jun Luo chatting happily. The two spoke casually, envious expressions appearing on the faces of the two Lien brothers. The younger, sickly-looking Lien Cheng was still all right, his gaze filled with envy and yearning. On the other side, there was also a Lien family disciple, Liening, whose gaze contained some gloominess and restlessness. Like Lien Cheng, the gaze with which he looked at Jun Luo was also filled with deep infatuation. However, Lien Ying's gaze contained even more fanaticism and extremity. When his gaze fell on Yen Zhaoge, he unconsciously lowered his eyelids, not letting others detect the light flickering within. After packing up at the meeting point, they set off once more, entering the rampaging black nightmare storms outside, trudging arduously towards the outskirts of the great western desert. After arriving at the meeting point, Elderly's mood instantly improved. The idle chess piece that I laid down earlier has finally come to reap the rewards. Beside him, Yao Shan still had a worried look on his face, feeling vexed over the failure of his earlier arrangements. Elderly shook his head slightly, sending over a sound transmission with his Orochi, "Prepare to move at any time. I've already sent the news out." That martial practitioner in the guise of Yao Shan controlled his expression well, not revealing the slightest clue or flaw. However, within his eyes, an excited glint clearly flashed through. "There's still a chance." The fake Yao Shan immediately asked impatiently. The Yao Shan in the guise of Elderly smiled. "There's an interesting child living in his own thoughts, not caring about anything else, unable to see the situation clearly, not knowing the severity of the situation. Many things, as long as one uses them appropriately, grasping the opportunity. Even small matters that originally weren't that important might become especially valuable." As Elderly smiled, he stroked his long beard. This was the real Elder Li's personal habit, imitated by him to perfection. He sent over a sound transmission. "Very soon, another black dragon dread will descend. While it will cause our people to be completely exposed, as long as we remain within the great western desert most of the time, Broad Creed Mountain will also be very hard-pressed to do anything to us. However, if we succeed, the results will be obvious. While Yen Zhaoge is only a martial scholar, he is different from others. If we can slay him, the blow to Broad Creed Mountain might even surpass that of losing some martial grandmasters." Elderly spoke slowly amidst his excitement. Yao Shan was also a little hesitant. This child has too many methods. Could it be? Elderly glanced at him. Him uprooting that stone pillar is already a miracle, but I believe that it must have also taken up quite a bit of his own energy. Other than that, the wariness of those who have succeeded despite not having achieved their objectives will definitely be different from the wariness of those who have achieved their objectives and are satisfied with themselves. While I don't know if that sacred artifact fragment of his can be used, I hope that this second black dragon dread will be of some use. As he stood guard, Elderly gazed over to the other side. There, Lien Ying's gaze had always been on Jun Luo, a crazed look gradually appearing on his face. A faint smile appeared on Elder Li's face. Just at this time, the howling of the storm in the distance grew louder, the terrifying black dragon dread appearing once more. PS5. 15 starting point is raining red packets. From noon onwards, there will be a round of snatching every hour. A large wave of 515 red packets will depend on luck. All of you go snatch, using the starting point coins you snatch to continue subscribing to my chapters. To be continued. Chapter 223. Qidian's Anniversary Celebration. The day with the most benefits. Other than the gift bag and the school bag, this time's 515 red envelope frenzy was definitely a must. There was no reason not to snatch the red envelopes. Set the alarm clock, the black nightmare storm, which had originally already been rampaging, suddenly grew violent once more at this moment, transforming into a violent black dragon dread, assaulting towards Yen Zhaoge and the others. Wherever the astral wind passed, everything, including the desert sand, was reduced to dust. If a living person's cultivation was insufficient and they didn't have any special means to protect themselves, they were destined to die a tragic death. Yen Zhaoge knit his brows slightly as he surveyed his surroundings. Although the black dragon dread was not commonly seen, it was still a famous calamity in the great western desert. It was filled with uncertainty, and no one could guarantee that they would not encounter it. Therefore, encountering the black dragon dread where he had pulled out the stone pillar, other than carefully dealing with it, Yen Zhaoge did not think too much about it. After entering the great western desert, in a place filled with black nightmare storms, there was nothing special about anticipating the black dragon dread and carefully dealing with the sudden calamities and tribulations. However, in such a short period of time, he had consecutively encountered the black dragon dread, which seemed to be chasing after him continuously. Yen Zhaoge had no choice but to pay attention to such a clearly abnormal thing. As Yen Zhaoge gazed at the black nightmare storm that swept through the heavens and the earth, once more, many thoughts instantly flashed through his mind. Someone wants to harm me, or maybe they're here for the stone pillar ruins. Abyss, the Sacred Sun clan, remnants of the Black Nightmare Mountain, remnants of the 5 spirit flags, or someone else. To be able to control and form the black dragon dread within a certain area without leaving a trace, it's highly possible that he's a remnant of the Black Nightmare Mountain with such an understanding of the power of the great western desert. We also cannot rule out the possibility that the remnant descendants of Black Nightmare Mountain have allied with the Sacred Sun clan or colluded with the Decimating Abyss, or even themselves being important members of the Decimating Abyss. The power of the great western desert was too tyrannical, but it was also mysterious and unpredictable, complicated, and hard to understand. Whether it was Broad Creed Mountain, the Sacred Sun clan, or Infinite Boundless Mountain, they were all currently facing the great western desert, still in the exploratory stage. In the post-Great Calamity 8 Extremities world, there had never been anyone who had truly been able to completely control the power of this land of great danger. However, if one had to say who had the deepest understanding of the great western desert among all of them, if it was possible to borrow its power to a certain extent, then it had to be the Black Nightmare Mountain of the Wind region. After the destruction of the Black Nightmare Mountain, the survivors retreated into the Great Western Desert and were active in the area between the Great Western Desert and the 4 continents of the Wind region until now. Yen Zhaoge himself, although he had never officially interacted with the remnants of the Black Nightmare Mountain before, he knew that they were savage by nature and good at forbearance. Their style of doing things was standard. In order to achieve their goals, they would do anything. At the same time, they were also very cautious. If there was even the slightest sign of trouble, they would retreat back to the great western desert to hide. In recent years, although the number of survivors of the Black Nightmare Mountain had been decreasing, there was no lack of vicious and merciless experts among them. Yen Zhaoge's gaze swiftly swept through everyone present, his gaze deep and distant. The black dragon, dread, quickly swept over from afar. In just a few short breaths, he had already arrived in front of everyone. Everyone unconsciously gazed at Yen Zhaoge, hoping that Yen Zhaoge would have a way to get them through this crisis once more. Previously, at the place where the stone pillar was buried, Xiao Chun had been able to disperse the black dragon dread in one fell swoop because he had relied on the distortions of the great western desert's natural weather power. At the same time, a profound concept of power had appeared within the stone pillar. This method could not be repeated if they wanted to imitate him within a short period of time, even if Yen Zhaoge immediately buried the stone pillar back into the desert. There would also not be enough time to turn it over again. However, this did not stop everyone from treating Yen Zhaoge as their pillar of support at this moment, placing high hopes on him. Yen Zhaoge's gaze swept over everyone's faces once more, looking deeply at them all. He said, "Everyone gather around me first. Don't get separated." Hearing his words, everyone immediately gathered around Yen Zhaoge. Elderly and Yao Shan were the first to bear the brunt of it. As the two drew closer to Yen Zhaoge, they pretended to turn their heads back to look at the incoming hurricane, but had actually been secretly observing Yen Zhaoge's surroundings all along. Pan Pan, who was even larger than the average elephant. He was currently standing guard behind Yen Zhaoge, and Ahu, as per usual, stood guard behind Yen Zhaoge like a guardian. A cold light flickered within Elder Li's eyes, this time as different from the last time. Through the corner of his eye, he saw that youth Lian Ying currently gazing fixedly at the young girl Jun Luo's back. Lian Ying bit down hard on his lips, not even knowing that blood had already leaked out. In his eyes, he only saw Jun Luo walking towards Yen Zhaoge with a face full of joy, trust, admiration, praise, and even worship. How he hoped that when Jun Luo looked at him, she would have such an expression. Lian Ying had not been doted on and cared for by his family since young, lacking love and a sense of security, even always being bullied and humiliated by those of the same generation. It was only when he had met Jun Luo that she had never looked down on him, even risking her life to save his life in the great western desert recently. To Jun Luo, perhaps it was just an ordinary interaction between friends. However, to Lian Ying, he had received care and warmth from her that he had never felt before. It was just that he still wanted even more. There was always fear at the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't increasing, perhaps it would become fewer and fewer, carrying with it a bit of a twisted, morbid state. It made it impossible for him to hold on tightly to that cute girl, the only light in his life. He couldn't bear to see her pay too much attention to others or treat him coldly. Every young man who approached Jun Luo would be treated as a potential opponent by him, including his brother Lian Cheng, who suffered the same fate as him. This also included that man in front of him who resembled a descending divinity, broad-creed young master, Yen Zhaoge. The gap between the two was really too great. He was just a concubine descendant of the Sand Region's Lien family who lived at the lowest level, unable to see the day where he would rise to the top. The Sand Region's Lien family was just a second-rate power under the rule of the Howling Wind Sword Sect. And the Howling Wind Sword Sect was just one of the powers of Broad Creed Mountain's boundless territory, one of Broad Creed Mountain's many principal elders, the first priest of the Howling Wind Sword Sect, one of Broad Creed Mountain's many acting elders. Even the head of the Lien family had to be treated as an esteemed guest. And Yen Zhaoge, at such a young age, was already able to make Broad Creed Mountain's principal elders lower their brows and make acting elders bend their backs. The gap between him and Lianing, how was it just the difference between the heavens and the earth? He knew that Jun Luo's feelings towards Yen Zhaoge were more like those of worship and longing, and not that of love between a man and a woman. But even so, when he saw the two of them conversing so happily, it was still like there were millions of venomous snakes biting at his heart. Jun Luo and he had never conversed like this before. Luo Luo. This was the title that Yen Zhaoge constantly spoke of, something that he had dreamt of countless times in his dreams, yet was unable to say it no matter what. Why was the gap between people so great? When Lianing saw the way Yen Zhaoge and Jun Luo were conversing, he felt for the first time that he was actually so far away from the only light in his life. This won't do. So what if you're the Broad Creed young master? Even the Broad Creed young master can't snatch you away. Lianing bit his lips hard. A sickly and pale smile appeared on his face as he suddenly pulled out a black short sword and pierced it into his own arm. Fresh blood dripped downwards, landing within the yellow sand, which suddenly turned snow white. P.S. 5. 15. Starting point is raining red packets. From noon onwards, there would be a round of snatching every hour. A large wave of 515 red packets would depend on luck. You all go snatch, and use the starting point coins you snatch to continue subscribing to my chapters. To be continued. Chapter 224. Supporting the stone pillar, Yen Zhaoge gazed at the black dragon dread in the distant horizon, as well as the people surging over towards him. As he observed, Yen Zhaoge sent a sound transmission with his aura chi to Hu and Feng Yunsheng, generally explaining the current situation. To be able to control the black dragon dread, one has to be at least a great grandmaster. At this moment, Ahu's expression was solemn, completely devoid of his usual slickness and mischievousness. The other side not directly making a move. It is likely that they are wary of the martial grandmasters of Broad Creed Mountain here, at the same time also having the effect of restricting them. Feng Yunsheng gripped the hilt of the black saber. Completely relying on the power of the black dragon dread's calamity, that grandmaster would not be able to get close, nor would he be able to control it meticulously. Thus, he does not have full confidence in achieving his goal. It would naturally be best if they can bury us with the black dragon dread. If they can't, then they can create chaos and cause us to be overwhelmed. Feng Yunsheng looked at Yen Zhaoge. At this time, if someone were to make use of the chaos to make a move, their chances of success would increase greatly. Yen Zhaoge's gaze was deep and distant as he nodded slightly, not saying anything more. Suddenly, gazing over, Yen Zhaoge saw that behind Jun Luo, that Lianing of the Lien family had a rather strange expression on his face as he suddenly drew out a black sword. Yen Zhaoge frowned. At first, he had thought that he wanted to harm Jun Luo. Just as he was about to stop him, he saw that the target of that black sword was, shockingly, Lien Ying himself. The black dagger pierced into Lien Ying's arm, and a wong sound rang out. Strange spiritual energy fluctuations emanated from the black dagger and the wound on Lien Ying's arm. Yen Zhaoge's gaze hardened. It seems to be a variant of some blood sacrificial technique. Some sort of cursed seal was buried within his bloodline. Fresh blood dripped down from Lien Ying's arm and landed on the sand below. The sand was instantly dyed white. Light and shadow floated in the air, condensing into a faintly discernible giant rune. Then, the rune imprinted itself on the ground. With the place where Lien Ying stood as the center, the snow-white color spread rapidly towards the surrounding desert. Suddenly, the ground beneath everyone's feet shook violently. Like an earthquake, the white sea of sand suddenly became dangerous. The desert beneath their feet seemed to have turned into quicksand. Instantly, It sank into the ground. Everyone was stunned. This is the White Dragon Dread. Everyone present was a martial artist. Other than Jun Luo, Lianing, and Lien Cheng, everyone else was a martial scholar. Sensing that something was wrong, he tried to leap up, but he was unable to break free from the white quicksand. He only exerted a little force with his feet. Not only was he unable to pull his feet out of the quicksand, he sank even deeper. Regardless of whether it was forceful or gentle, the result was the same. They tried to activate their Gang Qi, but as soon as the Gang Qi came into contact with the white quicksand, it would immediately disappear. In the sky above his head, a black storm raged. The desert beneath his feet had turned into a quicksand, well that wanted to bury him alive. His feet sank into the quicksand. No one dared to move. The more they struggled, the faster they would sink. While he was unable to move, he could only watch as the terrifying black storm approached him. Jun Luo cried out in surprise. There was nothing beneath her feet, and her body sank rapidly. Very quickly, nearly half of her body had sunk into the white sand. It was the same for Lien Cheng. However, Lianing was still standing steadily on the white sand. His footsteps were normal, which made him look exceptionally strange. Fresh blood continuously flowed from the wound on Lien Ying's arm, and his face grew paler and paler. Virtually no blood could be seen on his face at all, his entire person appearing incredibly frail. However, he was exceptionally excited, a sickly, excited smile on his face as he looked dazedly at Jun Luo. Luo, don't be afraid. It'll be fine. Lien Ying walked towards Jun Luo step by step, saying softly as he did so, as long as you hug me tightly, you won't have to worry about sinking into the desert. I can bring you along as we move freely underground. Like this. The Black Dragon Dread storm on the surface is also nothing to worry about. Smiling dazedly, he spread his arms wide, as if wanting to embrace Jun Luo. Look, Luo, I'm also not bad, right? Yen Zhaoge can save you, and so can I. On Lien Ying's arm, that black sword was still deeply embedded in the wound, fresh blood dripping unceasingly. Hearing his words, while they were in danger, everyone was also slightly dazed, some of them involuntarily looking towards Yen Zhaoge. Yen Zhaoge looked at Lianing, the same heart-blood curse. This is already no longer something that is purely within the realm of the martial Tao. It is more inclined towards mystical arts. However, this comes at the price of burning your own essence blood, resembling a sacrifice. While you have triggered the White Dragon Dread with your qi and blood, you won't be able to live for long. Yen Zhaoge raised his brows slightly. Making use of the connection between the blood curse and the natural disaster, you will indeed be able to move freely within the White Dragon Dread for a short period of time. Those who come into contact with you will similarly be able to be brought along as well, not having to worry about the danger of the quicksand. However, that would also drag that person into the same heart-blood curse, offering their essence blood as a sacrifice for the curse. Very quickly, they will follow in your footsteps, their qi and blood running dry as they die. You want Luo to die together with you. Hearing Yen Zhaoge's words, Jun Luo stared wide-eyed, looking at Lianing in disbelief. Lien Cheng, who had grown up together with Lianing, was even more dumbfounded, only feeling that this clan brother of his had suddenly become so unfamiliar that it was frightening. Meeting Jun Luo's gaze, Lien Ying's expression changed slightly, as for just that one moment he could not bear to see this, as well as being at a loss. But very quickly he chuckled lightly. Born in the same quilt, dying in the same hole, it can also be considered not in vain. Lianing gazed at Yen Zhaoge, still beats watching helplessly as Luo gets closer and closer to another man. Yen Zhaoge, you are a heaven's favored son. You are high and lofty. You will become a legend of this generation. Compared to you, who stands above the clouds, How many people like me are like dust, living like mud? But so what? Just because you stand above the clouds, you can trample on us as you please. Can you even snatch away the last bit of light in my life? Impossible. While I am weak, I also want to try pulling you down from the clouds, seeing how pathetic you look when you are covered in mud and water, seeing if you can still remain high and lofty like this. The thin youth roared agitatedly. At the same time, the white quicksand on the ground rampaged, a black storm howling within the sky. Other than the white dragon dread that had suddenly appeared beneath their feet, the black dragon dread formed of the black nightmare storm within the sky, obscuring the heavens and covering the earth, had already arrived before them, a terrifying black gale descending upon their heads. Yen Zhaoge's expression was tranquil as he supported the stone pillar, not moving at all where he was, the purple light of thunder suddenly flickering within his right eye, at the same time flipping his left hand, a small black incense burner appearing within it before he casually threw it to Hu, take care of the white dragon dread, as well as bring Luo and the others out. Even as Ahu acknowledged, he stared at Lianing with an unfriendly gaze. Although I actually don't really understand what exactly you are so resentful about. Yen Zhaoge's gaze was focused on the black nightmare storm, not even looking at Lianing at all. Still, is it because I have been too gentle these past 2 years of cultivating my character to the point that everyone now wants to try stepping on me to climb higher, to prove themselves? Chapter 225. As Yen Zhaoge focused on the black nightmare storm, the purple light of thunder suddenly flickered within his right eye. Because of the black hurricane, the world was originally dark, but under the illumination of the lightning, it suddenly became bright again. Yen Zhaoge let out a light yell, a purplish-green thunderbolt shooting out from his right eye before landing on the massive stone pillar by the side. The surface of the stone pillar once again lit up with runes of light. Then it emitted a brilliant radiance that spread in all directions. Rays of light intertwined with the black hurricane and stabilized it once again. On the other side, Ahu held the earth-devouring burner in his hand as he crouched on the ground, allowing the earth-devouring burner to come into contact with the spreading snow-white quicksand. Although he was unable to actively activate the effects of the earth-devouring burner, just the contact between the two caused the earth-devouring burner to suddenly produce a strange suction force. It did not devour the white quicksand, but the sand rapidly changed from snow-white to its original appearance. Lian Ying widened his eyes at this scene. The smile on his face disappeared, but his expression became even more twisted. He grabbed the black dagger that was still stuck in his arm and waved it forcefully, widening the wound. More blood flowed out and fell into the sand. But compared to the earth-devouring burner's devouring, Lian Ying's actions were clearly only a drop in the bucket. He stood there in a daze, his body becoming weaker and weaker, and the scene in front of him becoming more and more blurry. The extreme excitement could no longer conceal the fatigue and coldness he felt. Lian Ying could finally feel his life slipping away from his body. His body gradually softened and fell to the ground. The black dagger stuck in his arm glowed with a black light, giving off a bewitching feeling. Lian Ying's skin was getting paler and paler, and it was starting to dry up. The talisman imprinted on the ground was still trying to resist the earth-devouring burner, but it was not its match in the first place. Now, without the nourishment of Lian Ying's essence blood, it became even weaker. The talisman seal light patterns also began to be absorbed by the earth-devouring burner. Ahu stood there. He reached out to pick his ear, expressionlessly glancing at Lian Ying, whose life was gradually fading away. Then he no longer cared about him and retracted his gaze. He walked towards Jun Luo and the others who were trapped in the quicksand and helped them out. Lian Ying's vision gradually turned blurry as he struggled to look at Jun Luo. He saw that the disbelief on Jun Luo's face had not yet faded. He was going to die. That wasn't scary. What was scary was not having that girl with him on the road to death. Was he going to lose the only ray of light forever? He once again returned to the world of darkness and despair. I don't want to, Lien Ying mumbled to himself. He twisted his neck weakly, trying to find the person who gave him the black dagger. This is different from what we agreed on. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be. Lien Ying's eyes were still wide open, unwilling to close, but they had already lost their luster. Yao Shan, who was disguised as elderly, also did not look at Lien Ying. To him, this chess piece had already served its purpose, and at the same time, its value had been exhausted. There was no need to waste any more effort on it. He was currently staring intently at Yan Zhaoge, gazing at the light of thunder that was emitted from Yan Zhaoge's right eye. That terrifying power made his heart palpitate, but it also made his heart slightly hot and gave birth to an urge to possess it. Elderly immediately suppressed the greed in his heart and regained his composure. Very good. The Black Dragon Dread has successfully used up the energy of his Saint Weapon Fragment, and has even drawn his attention. Turning his gaze towards Ahu, who was currently using the earth-devouring burner to restrain the White Dragon Dread, and at the same time saving people from the quicksand, the light in Elder Li's eyes grew even brighter. This servant with the cultivation of an apex martial scholar has also been successfully lured away. Elder Li sucked in a deep breath. He sent a sound transmission through his aura chi to his companion beside him. Now, do it. You tie down that Pichio. I'll take Yan Zhaoge's life. Saying thus, Elder Li, who had already slowly neared Yan Zhaoge's side earlier, his expression not changing, he continued getting closer to Yan Zhaoge's back. And Yao Shan also did the same, intentionally or otherwise, his figure intersecting, wanting to separate Yan Zhaoge and Pan Pan. Towards Yan Zhaoge, the two did not have the slightest intention of underestimating him, even though they had already first used up the power of Yan Zhaoge's sacred artifact fragment. Even drawing the tiger away from the mountain and drawing the attention of Ahu and Yan Zhaoge, they still had to fight for the greatest chance. They had to close the distance as much as possible before exploding forth and killing him in a single blow. However, not waiting for Elder Li and Yao Shan to reach the distance that they had anticipated, just having moved their feet, a strange change suddenly occurred. While his figure was massive, the eyes of Pan Pan, who had always been lazy, charmingly naive, clumsy, and sluggish, suddenly revealed a fierce light. With a low, deep roar, Pan Pan suddenly exerted force with his feet, shooting madly out, resembling a mountain collapsing. His target was precisely Elder Li. Elder Li's pupils abruptly dilated. Was he startled by the Black Dragon Dread and the White Dragon Dread? Or is it that? Not giving him much time to think. While Pan Pan's figure was large, his speed was extraordinarily fast, his momentum like rushing thunder as he crushed and trampled over everything before him, his violent aura shocking to the extreme. That body that resembled a small mountain instantly arrived before Elder Li, pressuring over like a collapsing mountain. Elder Li's face was instantly ugly to the extreme. If he did not resist or evade with all his might, he would be stomped into meat paste by this massive beast before him. If he really exerted force to resist or evade, he would be exposed. While the imitation killing jade could normally mimic the appearance of the person being killed, even their aura being seemingly real at the end of the day, he was not a true broad creed mountain martial practitioner. As soon as he exerted force, he would immediately be exposed. However, under these circumstances, no matter why Pan Pan had suddenly gone berserk, if it was the true Elder Li, what reason would he have to stand there like a block of wood, foolishly waiting to be stomped to death by Pan Pan? The Yao Shan impersonating Elder Li let out a long sigh towards the heavens, his figure abruptly retreating at an extreme speed. His aura chi and fist intent erupted. this retreat actually having a concept similar to the terrifying black nightmare storm within the sky that had yet to calm. The scene of the illusory heaven and earth formed of his Orochi was that of the boundless black hurricane that filled the surrounding area. The direct lineage martial art of the former wind domain's sacred ground, black nightmare, divine wind. The sudden change in the scene caught most of those present unprepared. Just looking at Yen Zhaoge's Pixiu suddenly going berserk, charging towards Elder Li, it had already left them a little unable to react. However, the change that happened afterwards left them all dumbfounded like wooden chickens. A broad creed mountain martial practitioner, Elder Li, as an acting elder, actually executed a direct lineage martial art of Black Nightmare Mountain. While descendants of Black Nightmare Mountain were already extremely rare nowadays, this was, after all, the wind domain. How could those active here not recognize the direct lineage martial art of Black Nightmare Mountain, whose name had once shaken the Eight Extremities world? Yao Shan's face was expressionless. Having retreated, he knew that it would be hard for him to succeed today. Glancing at his companions from the corner of his eye, he saw that the companion, who should have been in charge of restraining Pan Pan, was currently also being blocked by Feng Yunsheng. Yen Zhaoge now swiveled his head, looking calmly at the Yao Shan who had the appearance of Elder Li. So, is it that I have been too gentle these past 2 years, thus causing people to feel that I am easy to bully? Did you think that I was only asking about that surnamed Lien just now? It is you I am speaking to. To be continued. Chapter 226. Yen Zhaoge's gaze fell on Yao Shan, who looked exactly the same as Elder Li. Not only can it imitate one's external appearance, even one's breathing can be imitated. Without actually fighting, martial practitioners of the same clan wouldn't be able to tell. Yen Zhaoge said coldly, "Is it an imitation-killing jade?" Since it was an imitation-killing jade, it meant that the original owner of this appearance, the real Elder Li, had already been killed. Looking at Yao Shan, Yen Zhaoge's gaze was cold, not carrying any warmth at all. Being stared at by Yen Zhaoge like this, even though Yao Shan had seen many things, he still felt a chill in his heart. While he didn't know where the flaw was, since he had already been seen through by Yen Zhaoge, Yao Shan's first thought was to immediately retreat. With Yen Zhaoge already prepared, Yao Shan didn't have the confidence to forcibly kill him. Since that was so, staying behind and fighting to the death would have no value at all. It might even be a meaningless struggle, losing his life for nothing, missing with a single strike, immediately retreating 1,000 li, planning a follow-up plan. This was what Yao Shan thought, but when he wanted to retreat, he discovered that it was far from being as simple as he had thought. Pan Pan's entire body was filled with a ferocious aura, completely different from that dumb, stupid, lazy look of his earlier, his entire body surging with white flames and black streams of water. The white flames enveloped Pan Pan's entire body, while numerous streams of black water expanded, instantly enveloping the surrounding area, resembling a cage as they trapped Yao Shan within. Yao Shan attempted to forcibly break through the obstruction of the black water cage, but just having been slowed slightly by the black streams of water, Pan Pan had already arrived before him, forcing him to deal with it with his full strength. After he had evaded Pan Pan's round of attacks, the black water cage before him had regained its original form, even stronger than before. As time passed, the black streams of water clearly grew more and more vigorous. Yao Shan had originally intended to forcibly withstand Pan Pan's attack, risking his life to break out of the encirclement. However, the white flames on Pan Pan's body gathered, its power extremely violent. This caused Yao Shan to despairingly discover that if he only cared about escaping, suffering a full-powered blow from Pan Pan, he would probably be heavily injured on the spot, completely unable to escape. This Pixiu of Yen Zhaoge's was even more powerful than they had expected. Glancing to the side from the corner of his eye, he saw that his companion, who had disguised himself, had also been blocked. It was difficult for him to escape. Yao Shan's heart sank to the bottom. At this moment, Ahu had returned from saving Junluo and the others. He bared his teeth and looked at them, chuckling coldly. Black Nightmare Godly Wind technique. Hee. I happen to be learning this technique as well. Why don't we spar? Hearing this, Yao Shan and the other man grunted, but did not say anything. The other broad creed mountain martial practitioners present all understood now. Looking at Yao Shan, who still had the appearance of elderly, they all had strange expressions on their faces. Hearing Yen Zhaoge mention the imitation killing jade, those who had heard of its rumors before immediately realized. Amidst their realization, the gazes with which they looked at Yao Shan also turned cold. Yao Shan looked at Yen Zhaoge rather unwillingly. You didn't personally make a move, and also didn't let that tiger make a move, instead getting your Pichio mount to pretend to have lost control of itself in shock to probe me. Am I right? Only when I was forced to dodge the Pichio's attack and revealed my martial arts foundation did you see through my secret. Yen Zhaoge smiled indifferently. You seem to have gotten something wrong. Now, it is you who are about to fall into my hands. Later on, it should be you who will answer some of my questions regarding the remnants of your Black Nightmare Mountain. And do you think that you still have the free time to ask me questions now? Yao Shan's brows were knit tightly. Having followed Old Man Li for a very long time, I have long since become his trusted aide. His habits and style of doing things, I feel that I am even more familiar with them than you, Yen Zhaoge. Where exactly did I reveal a flaw, causing you to grow wary? Why do I have to explain it to you? Yen Zhaoge chortled. Explain to you where your flaw is, after which I will introduce my plan in detail. How is it so troublesome? You only need to know what you will be facing next. Yen Zhaoge swiveled his head, saying mildly to who, I want them alive. Squeeze out everything they know. Having already captured another person, Ahu now smiled coldly as he entered the black water cage to deal with Yao Shan. Yao Shan howled furiously, wanting to fight to the death. However, he was hard-pressed to stand against who? The black streams of water released by Pan's innate talent unceasingly restricted Yao Shan, causing even if Yao Shan wanted to commit suicide, it would be hard for him to do so. Junluo and Lien Cheng also regained their wits at this time. Looking at the already dried-up corpse of Lianing as well as Yao Shan and Hu, their emotions were complicated. Meanwhile, the group of broad creed mountain martial practitioners all stared hatefully at Yao Shan and the others, especially seeing that Yao Shan's current appearance was exactly the same as Elder Li's. They felt even more resentful. Having finished speaking to Hu, Yen Zhaoge's attention returned to the stone pillar in his hands. Radiance shot out from the stone pillar, transforming into a formless barrier that shielded them from the wind and rain, blocking the black storm that was still rampaging unceasingly within the sky. The black dragon dread was ferocious, but comparatively speaking, it left as quickly as it had come. Resisting it for a period of time without being harmed, the momentum of the wind would gradually weaken once more. After this violent wave of the black dragon dread had passed, while the black nightmare storm would still be violent and piercingly cold, its power shocking, even without the help of the stone pillar, Yen Zhaoge and the others would still be able to withstand it. Looking at the black dragon dread before them, which was already beginning to gradually weaken, Yen Zhaoge nodded slightly. Feng Yunsheng retracted her saber, returning to his side as she said in a low tone, if it was the imitation killing jade, then Elderly should have already been killed. Yen Zhaoge nodded after a moment of silence, Feng Yunsheng also feeling slightly downcast. After they had arrived at Suzhou City, It had been Elderly who had received them, then acted as their guide as they had entered the great western desert together. Along the way, Elderly had been a capable and experienced person, managing everything in a very orderly manner, at the same time interacting extremely amicably with Yen Zhaoge, Feng Yinsheng, and Hu. Feng Yinsheng gazed at Yao Shan. I also don't know when Elderly was killed. And how did he deal with his corpse? Yen Zhaoge answered, there is a limit to how long the imitation killing jade can be maintained. To play it safe, he wouldn't have made a move too early. The first time we came to the Black Dragon Dread was the first time they wanted to kill me. He most likely killed Elderly not too long ago. Calculating the time, this is their second move, and also his last chance. Not long after, the imitation killing jade should lose its effect. Hearing his words, Feng Yinsheng said, Elderly was a Xiantian martial scholar. If he died, the deterioration of his qi and blood would naturally dissipate. If he was killed at the place where you pulled out the stone pillar, then Elderly's corpse should not have been buried underground all this time. On our way here, we did not feel the qi of death or the qi of blood at all. If they brought Elderly's corpse along as they moved, there should be a shadow shrinking pouch, Yen Zhaoge said, one of them impersonating Elderly while the other was still acting as Yao Shan. This additional person should have been within that shadow shrinking pouch before this. Feng Yinsheng asked, by the way, I also want to know, how did you see through his flaws? Chapter 2:27. Feng Yinsheng asked Yen Zhaoge via sound transmission with her aura qi, and Yen Zhaoge replied via sound transmission, since I knew that they wanted to kill me while the Black Dragon Dread was creating chaos, I naturally had to observe carefully. When the Black Dragon Dread arrived, I asked everyone to gather around me. As they did so, they were naturally all looking at me, wanting to know what I had to do. Only these two, other than looking at me, were also constantly observing Hu and Pan Pan's positions. Thinking back carefully, when the Black Dragon Dread first appeared, it also seemed like this. Why were they concerned about Hu and Pan Pan? Yen Zhaoge curled his lips. I'll take it that the two of them both like men, having taken a fancy to Hu, while he couldn't hear Yen Zhaoge's voice. The Ahu who was just about to capture Yao Shan suddenly shivered for no reason at all, almost giving Yao Shan a chance to commit suicide. On the other side, Yen Zhaoge continued nonchalantly. But why were they still paying attention to Pan Pan? Could it be that their tastes are so hardcore that it's obscene? Hearing his words, Feng Yinsheng didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. While Yen Zhaoge's words were teasing, there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile in his tone. In the eyes of the outside world, not only is Ahu my retainer, he is also my guard. If Ahu isn't here, then so be it. As long as Ahu is by my side, those who want to assassinate me all know that to kill Yen, first kill Tiger. They don't have any martial grandmasters. If they want to touch me, they would have to consider breaking through Hu's protection. As for Pan Pan, he has always been by my side, as a spirit beast protecting its owner. No matter how mischievous and harmless Pan Pan usually looks, the Pishio race is also one of the few powerful spirit beasts with extraordinary talent. Moreover, just his size alone forms a natural barrier by my side, forcing them to go around him. As the Black Dragon Dread gradually passed, the light patterns on the stone pillar similarly began to disappear. The flickering light of thunder within Yen Zhaoge's eyes also gradually dimmed. Seeing that Yao Shan had already been captured by Hu, Yen Zhaoge said mildly, the Black Dragon Dread is not only to create chaos. At the same time, it is also to deplete the power of the sacred artifact fragment in my body. Feng Yinsheng nodded, going forward to mention this to Ahu. Ahu nodded. I've searched there is indeed a shadow shrinking pouch. I haven't had the time to see what exactly is inside. Receiving the shadow shrinking pouch, Feng Yinsheng opened it, and indeed discovered Elder Li's corpse inside. Elder Li had been dead for a long time. The corpse's qi and blood had gradually deteriorated. However, he was a Xiantian realm guru when he was alive. His physical body's qi and blood were strong. Although his body was deteriorating, there were no signs of decay so far. The other broad Creed mountain martial practitioners crowded over, looking at the already dead Elder Li, as well as Yao Shan, who had been captured by who but still had the appearance of Elder Li, instantly feeling infuriated. Elder Li's face had already stiffened. However, there was still shock and horror that had yet to disperse. His eyes were wide open and empty, and he died with everlasting regret. Coming before Elder Li, Yan Zhaoge supported that massive stone pillar with one hand, but still lowered his body, extending his left hand, gently closing Elder Li's eyes. Squeeze them dry of everything they know, and then there's no need to keep them. Yan Zhaoge stood up once more and said to Ahu. Ahu answered without hesitation, "Yes, young master." Yao Shan's face was ashen. He lowered his head and said nothing. His companion struggled and said, "We're going to die either way. Do you expect us to confess?" Swiveling his head to glance at him, Ahu grinned savagely. Sometimes death is actually not scary. Yan Zhaoge raised his head to look at the black nightmare storm before him, which was gradually returning to its normal state, narrowing his eyes slightly into slits. Black Nightmare Mountain shaking his head, Yan Zhaoge inspected the things that Ahu had obtained from the two. The things of value were comparatively limited. There were mainly two things that Yan Zhaoge was concerned about. The first was that on the body of Yao Shan's companion, there was still an unused imitation killing jade. Stroking the imitation killing jade, Yan Zhaoge fell into deep thought. The imitation killing jade had many restrictions. For example, its time of use was limited, and it had restrictions on the cultivation bases of both the killer and the killed. However, it could not be denied that this thing could play an important role at certain times. Especially when the killer and the killed were extremely familiar with each other, understanding most of the other's habits of speech and so on, it could indeed achieve the effect of passing off the fake as the genuine to a large extent. With Yao Shan as an example, he had impersonated Elder Li. Before the second attack of the Black Dragon Dread, Yan Zhaoge had indeed not suspected him at all. While he currently had no use for it, keeping it in his hands, it might come in handy at some point in the future. Even if Yan Zhaoge didn't use it himself, handing it over to someone he could trust, it might also play an unexpected role. As for the second thing, originating from Yao Shan, it was half a piece of jade, its style extremely simple and unadorned. Yan Zhaoge observed it carefully for a moment. It should be a complete piece of jade, having been split into two right down the middle, the whereabouts of the other piece unknown. There were patterns on the surface of the jade. While they were simple, they were majestic, causing one to have a deep impression of them. After carefully analyzing it for a moment, Yan Zhaoge was slightly taken aback. Oh, it's actually a spirit pattern from before the Great Calamity. Spirit patterns were not words, not having any special meaning within them. However, after analyzing it for a moment, Yan Zhaoge could confirm that if it was a complete piece of jade, the spirit pattern would be complete, and it would be a small-scale spirit formation. Within this small-scale spirit formation, perhaps some rather valuable things might be concealed. From the state of the fracture, as well as the degree to which the spiritual qi has dissipated, this piece of jade has just been split apart not too long ago. Yan Zhaoge pondered for a moment. The other half of the jade might also be circulating around the wind domain, very possibly in the sand region. Since that's the case, we can instruct people to search for it carefully. This kind of spirit pattern was also rather rare before the Great Calamity. There shouldn't be many people of the current eight extremities world who are able to carefully distinguish it and activate the spirit formation. This means that the information concealed within the spirit formation has most likely still not been deciphered. As Yen Zhaoge thought about it, he didn't really take it to heart, shrugging nonchalantly as he kept the imitation killing jade along with the jade coin. Who directly brought the two along as they entered that shadow shrinking pouch. After this, they still had to set off as soon as possible, leaving the Great Western Desert. And things like extorting a confession couldn't be rushed. Only slowly would it be easier to break through the mental defenses of a captive. Therefore, Yen Zhaoge took the shadow shrinking pouch, leading them on their way. While they didn't know what method Ahu had used to get the two to speak, the Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners under Elder Li's command, as they brought Elder Li's corpse along, all had expressions of anticipation and hatred on their faces. Feng Yunqing's expression was as per usual, while watching Yen Zhaoge keep the shadow shrinking pouch containing the trio, Jun Luo and Lian Cheng's gazes were a little complicated. To be continued. Chapter 228. The other Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners ignored Lian Ying's corpse. Previously, in the Black Nightmare Storm, he had been saved along with Jun Luo and Lian Cheng. In the end, at the critical moment, this unremarkable kid had repaid their kindness with enmity, nearly stabbing them all with a knife. If not for Yen Zhaoge having a way to deal with it in time, they would have had to guard against the black dragon dread above them, while also being wary of the white dragon dread formed by Lian Ying below them. Because of Elder Li's death, the enraged Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners not directly killing the corpse to vent their anger was already a very calm performance. Looking at Lian Ying's corpse, Lian Cheng sighed, going forward to collect his remains. Once upon a time, he and this clansman of his had been in the same boat, having had similar encounters, thus getting along rather well. Both of them were born of concubines, their parents having died early, their personalities also rather soft and gentle, often being bullied in the family. Growing up together, they could be considered to be one of the few friends and family they had. It was just that at some point, Lian Ying had gradually distanced himself from him, causing Lian Cheng to be very puzzled. Hearing Lian Ying's words just now and seeing his behavior, Lian Cheng finally recalled that it seemed that from that moment he had met Jun Luo, Lian Ying's attitude towards him had begun to change. While Lian Cheng's personality was a little soft, he was not a fool. Already understanding the reason for Lian Ying's change, he could not help but sigh within his heart. Actually, to Lian Cheng, how was Jun Luo not a rare ray of light that had appeared in his life? It was just that Lian Cheng was not as extreme as Lian Ying. At the same time, he was more pessimistic. He had long since felt that looking at Jun Luo was like looking up at the clouds. While Lian Ying had not been kind to him, the white dragon dread he had created having nearly devoured him. Looking at the already dead Lian Ying, Lian Cheng's heart still softened, not bearing for him to die in the desert just like this. Even though he was already dead, at least he could return to his roots. Looking at Lian Cheng and Lian Ying, Jun Luo bit her lip, somewhat hesitating. Her gaze fell on Lian Ying, appearing extremely complex. On Lian Cheng, it was slightly softer. After a while, Jun Luo also sighed, going forward to help Lian Cheng. They collected Lian Ying's corpse, preparing to bring it out of the Great Western Desert. Seeing this scene, the group of Broad Creed mountain martial practitioners did not help, nor did they stop it as they retracted Elder Li's corpse. He stood silently by the side, awaiting Yen Zhaoge's instructions. Yen Zhaoge glanced mildly at Jun Luo. Luo, this is the pugilistic world, the normal state of the outside world. Or perhaps it should be said that this actually isn't much at all. It is still a very bright side. there are still many darker, bloodier things. It was a bloody, cold, and sudden assassination. It was a scheme that exploited a person's weakness. The enmity and vengeance between the two great forces affected the others as well. Black Nightmare Mountain had long since been destroyed. Now, it was just some of their descendants who wanted revenge. Their target was also not the higher echelon experts of Broad Creed Mountain, but Yen Zhaoge, who, while his status was currently increasing, had still yet to enter the martial grandmaster realm. The conflict between the two sides was far from comparable to the storm that could be stirred up by a battle between two holy lands. But such a ripple was already enough to destroy people like Jun Luo, Lian Cheng, and Lianing. It was fine if he didn't get involved, but once he did, he wouldn't be able to control himself. They might not even know how they died. Even at the moment of his death, Lianing probably didn't fully understand that he was just a chess piece in Yao Shan's hands, a part of Yao Shan's assassination plan. It wasn't even the crucial part, just a supporting part. After keeping Lian Ying's corpse, Lian Cheng brought it along with him. Jun Luo stood up, biting her lower lip as she looked at Yen Zhaoge. Yen Zhaoge said quietly, "The enmity between my clan and the remnants of Black Nightmare Mountain, to you, is indeed because your strength is insufficient. It is true that our strength is not enough, and we had no choice but to get involved. It is not your fault, nor is it a crime of fighting. It was just that for the powers that Jun Luo, Lian Cheng, and the others were from, it was very hard for them to guard against these storms that blew down from the upper echelons. They would be swept in just like that. Many times, there would be no warning at all. And in the Howling Wind Sword sect that you hail from, there are actually quite a few powers of the same level. If there is conflict between them, they will similarly resort to all sorts of methods." Jun Luo was silent for a moment before she said in a low voice, "Brother Yen, I understand what you mean." She raised her head slightly stubbornly, "But I still believe that the outside world does not only consist of these. I have to understand these things. Otherwise, I don't know when I might end up harming others and myself. However, it also won't cause me to hesitate and not advance." The girl's gaze was still bright. Seeing it, Yen Zhaoge smiled slightly. "I don't have the intention of making decisions for you. I'm just giving you a reminder. Before doing anything, think of Uncle Jun. If something happens to you, they will inevitably be sad." Jun Luo nodded. "Yes, brother." Yen Zhaoge said, "All right, let's go. Other matters can wait until we have left the great western desert." The group loudly agreed, following Yen Zhaoge's footsteps as they continued on their way back to Suzhou City. On the way, Feng Yunsheng glanced at Jun Luo, smiling as she sent a sound transmission over to Yen Zhaoge with her orochi. "The little girl is not bad." Holding the stone pillar with his right hand, Yen Zhaoge similarly smiled as he walked. "Did you also walk like this that year?" Feng Yunsheng smiled. "More or less. That year, I was almost drugged unconscious by human traffickers, being sold to them as a female slave." Yen Zhaoge swiveled his head to glance at her. Feng Yunsheng's expression, on the other hand, was very relaxed. "When I was in the Sacred Sun clan, while I often went out to temper myself, it was mainly to increase my experience in the area of the martial Dao. Also, with the seniors of the clan following me, even if I met with danger, even if I had to suffer, I would more or less be able to preserve my life. Afterwards, when I had just escaped from the clan, I had no one to rely on. I hid my tracks and fled by myself, avoiding being hunted down and killed, having fled almost half of the fire domain. In the process of fleeing, I met quite a few people and things and also made some friends, but..." Feng Yunsheng chuckled. "The first friend I made while fleeing seemed to be extremely righteous, treating people warmly and warmly. When we first met, It really moved me to the extreme. At that time, I had just avoided a wave of Sacred Sun Clan martial practitioners. While I had successfully broken out of their encirclement, I had been heavily injured. After getting to know that person, he very warmly wanted to help me find a place to recuperate. Feng Yunsheng smiled. Who knew that it was actually a human trafficker wanting to drug me unconscious and sell me to others, even having already contacted a buyer? If I had not discovered it in time, a few years ago, I would probably have already been a caged bird in some family's private residence. Yan Zhaoge curled his lips. I won't ask you about the outcome of that human trafficker. Feng Yunsheng laughed and didn't continue speaking. Having left the area of the Great Western Desert, while it was still a stretch of yellow sand before them, that terrifying scene of the all-encompassing black storm finally disappeared, left behind by them. Before they had even reached Suzhou City, the results of Ahu's interrogation were already out. To be continued. Chapter 229. As for whether Ahu's interrogation would be able to pry open the mouths of the two, Yan Zhaoge expressed that he had never been worried, because Yan Zhaoge had also handed the cold marrow needles technique over to Ahu. Other than the cold marrow needles as a last resort, Ahu also had many other interrogation techniques. This simple-looking big fella was proficient in many different fields, a competent and reliable lackey. It was just that he had never had the chance to display many of his specialized techniques. Who indeed did not disappoint them. Before they had even arrived at Suzhou City, he had already squeezed out what Yan Zhaoge wanted from the two, indeed connected to the decimating abyss. Yan Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. Of the survivors of Black Nightmare Mountain, a considerable portion, while not having fallen to the dark side, have also joined the decimating abyss. However, there are still many who maintain their independence, at the same time also secretly guarding against the decimating abyss and the 9 underworlds, just that the two sides still maintain contact. These people are mainly receiving the support of the Sacred Sun Clan. This is something to be expected. Hearing Ahu's report, Yan Zhaoge muttered to himself. Ahu imitated him, also stroking his lower chin. I just don't know how much the Sacred Sun Clan knows about the decimating abyss through their contact with the survivors of Black Nightmare Mountain. The level of the two is still a little too low, and the information they know is still limited. Yan Zhaoge said. No, actually it's already quite sufficient, especially knowing that a considerable portion of the survivors of Black Nightmare Mountain who joined the decimating abyss and left the Wind Domain have returned to the Wind Domain these past few months. This piece of information is very important. The other side might have made a move again. After pondering for a moment, Yan Zhaoge said to Ahu, all the information obtained, split it into 2, one for the clan, the other for the first seat elder of the Sand region. Ahu nodded in agreement, going off to make the arrangements. Yan Zhaoge gazed back in the direction of the Great Western Desert, where the sky was still dark. There was at least one great Grandmaster martial artist from the Black Nightmare Mountain, having executed the Black Dragon Dread twice earlier. Meanwhile, Yan Zhaoge had similarly already confirmed that the principal elder of Broad Creed Mountain's lineage, who was closest to this place and presided over the Howling Wind Sword sect, had also previously arrived at the Great Western Desert. Therefore, in order to intimidate that Black Nightmare Mountain Martial Grandmaster, he had been unable to personally make a move. Yan Zhaoge left the Great Western Desert safely with that pillar of the Divine Palace. The principal elder of the Howling Wind sect also withdrew from that dangerous area, but he didn't go far. Instead, he temporarily oversaw the outskirts of the Great Western Desert. Yan Zhaoge's group returned to Suzhou City. Having been Suzhou City's acting elder for so many years, Elder Li had quite a bit of prestige here. Hearing the grievous news The broad Crebe Mountain martial practitioners who were stationed here all felt pained. The first seat elder of the Sand Continent and the principal elder of the Howling Wind sect also received the news of Elder Lee's death and sent messages to comfort everyone. At the same time, he arranged for the new Suzhou Deacon Elder to take over. Before the new acting elder of Suzhou arrived, Yan Zhaoge temporarily remained in Suzhou City. Yan Zhaoge's current status was rather special. Theoretically speaking, even the first seat elder of the San region was unable to control him. If he had any needs, someone like the principal elder of the Howling Wind sect would do his best to satisfy him. While his age and cultivation base were still young after Yan Zhaoge had left the clan and gone down there, his status had been extraordinary. However, Yan Zhaoge's current energy, it was still mainly concentrated on that pillar of divine ability that he had brought out of the great western desert. Entering Suzhou City, arriving at the lodgings that he had arranged for himself, Yan Zhaoge finally put down the massive stone pillar. The stone pillar stood upright on the ground, not a single speck of dust rising from the ground. It seemed completely weightless, just like when Yan Zhaoge had been carrying it. However, only those who had truly tried it would know how heavy this thing was. If not for having already achieved an initial refinement of it, Yan Zhaoge was certain that even if he had stepped into the martial grandmaster realm, he might not be able to lift it up. Having undergone an initial refinement in the great western desert earlier, staying in Suzhou City this time, Yan Zhaoge was preparing to refine the stone pillar a second time. When he had entered the city just now, the sight of Yan Zhaoge carrying the massive stone pillar had already drawn the attention of many. It was indeed flashy, but if he continued walking like this, it would really be too flashy. Not speaking of anything else, bringing along such a big fella that could not be stored in a shadow-shrinking pouch. No matter where he went, anyone would know that he had come, unable to hide his tracks even if he wanted to. It would be like holding up a torch in the middle of the night, and this torch would also be unable to be extinguished on its own. Let everyone know that I've been here. These words sounded rather invigorating, rather energetic, rather flashy, rather arrogant. However, if a few more words were added at the front, the meaning would completely change. For example, I can only let everyone know that I've been here. Yan Zhaoge sat in the meditative position on the empty ground in the courtyard, raising his head to look at the pillar of the divine palace that was more than 20 meters in length, seemingly even taller than the city walls of Suzhou City. He repeatedly drew in midair with a single hand, his orochi leaving behind traces, as he inscribed one line after another, forming a profound diagram. Then, the silhouettes of these diagrams were inscribed together within a crystal. These diagrams were the ones that Yan Zhaoge had inscribed onto the pillar of the divine palace. What was inscribed within was also Yan Zhaoge's interpretation of these diagrams. The diagrams on the pillar of the divine palace did not by themselves possess any special meaning, but contained unique principles as well as concepts within. Observing them, martial practitioners with lower cultivation bases would be hard-pressed to comprehend their profundities and value. However, if it was experts at the level of Yuan Zhengfeng, Yan Di, Fang Zhuan, and Shi Tai, they might be able to gain something unique from them. Depending on their individual circumstances, their gains might also be different, some more, some less. However, it was indisputably a great deal of wealth, bringing the entire stone pillar back. The one who could actually truly refine and decipher the deeper parts within was still Yan Zhaoge. To Yuan Zhengfeng and the others, what was meaningful were the profundities contained within these diagrams. Therefore, while Yan Zhaoge temporarily remained in Suzhou City to refine the stone pillar a second time, he had inscribed all of the diagrams on the pillar of the divine palace. Not revealing anything, he secretly arranged for people to send them back to broad Crebe Mountain as soon as possible. Other than this matter, let our people search carefully for this thing in the sand region and see if they can find the other half. After handing over the crystal with the diagrams inscribed onto it to Yen Zhaoge took out that half of the jade coin. Don't make it public. Search in a low-profile manner. Ahu received it. Rest easy. Young master, I know what to do. After Ahu left, Yen Zhaoge's mind returned to the pillar of the divine palace before him, beginning to attempt to refine it a step further. As Yen Zhaoge's fist intent merged with it, the scenes of the great calamity that years seemed to appear before his eyes once more. As the heavens collapsed and the earth split apart, the scenes turned illusory, falling straight to the 9 heavens. Yen Zhaoge knew full well that this was the stone pillar descending from the heavens, as though it had a life of its own. His current perspective belonged to the stone pillar. The stone pillar directly fell into the desert. At first, the desert was completely ordinary, but the weather gradually changed afterwards, turning into the current Great Western Desert. And in this process, the stone pillar also gradually merged with the weather of the Great Western Desert, sometimes being exposed outside, sometimes being buried by the sandstorms, not a trace of it to be seen. Yen Zhaoge seemed to have transformed into this stone pillar, feeling the flow of time alongside it. Suddenly, Yen Zhaoge's eyes lit up as an indistinct figure appeared within his field of vision. To be continued.